Chapter 1, Prologue. Use the boy. The hissing speech seemed to come from Quirrell himself, but it was not the defense professor's own voice. Harry felt the ropes binding him fall away, and at Quirrell's command, he moved to face the mirror of Erist. He knew that if he could just lie about what he saw, he might get out of this alive and keep the philosopher's stone safe. As he gazed into the mirror, Harry received the blood-red stone from his mirror self, deposited in his pocket. "Well," said Quirrell impatiently, "what do you see?" Harry was barely coherent as he made up some lie about winning the house cup for Gryffindor, as if he would care about something so petty when he was trying to prevent a dark wizard from claiming the most valuable artifact in the world. He was surprised when Quirrell seemed to buy it, pushing him out of the way. But then the high hiss came back again. "He lies, he lies." "Potter, come back here," Quirrell shouted. "Tell me the truth. What did you just see?" The high voice spoke again. "Let me speak to him, face to face." "Master, you're not strong enough." "I have strength enough for this." And as Quirrell's turban was unwrapped, Harry saw for the first time the murderer of his parents, the scourge of wizarding Britain, the deadliest and most evil Dark Lord in a millennium, Lord Voldemort. Harry stood firm, refusing to hand over the stone, even though Voldemort knew it was in his pocket. He heard from the only living witness of his parents' bravery in defying the Dark Lord with their last breaths. But soon enough, the time for talking was over, and he tried to pass back through the wall of flames to the potions room. "Seize him," came Voldemort's voice, and Quirrell's hand closed around his wrist. He struggled in the defense professor's grasp, and he felt a hand reach into his pocket, withdrawing the philosopher's stone. He had failed. Lord Voldemort was exceedingly pleased. Infiltrating Hogwarts under the old meddler's nose was a huge risk, but even had he failed, Lord Voldemort was immortal and would survive to return in a different way. With his prize won, he could only smile. Lord Voldemort would return greater and more powerful than ever. With the elixir of life to strengthen his body and Horcruxes to anchor his soul, he would be a true immortal. Even better, the child of prophecy, the so-called boy who lived, was completely at Lord Voldemort's mercy. Quirrell had observed the boy all year, and he had not shown aptitude for anything except Quidditch. But perhaps he was hiding his true power. With a flex of his magic, he dove into the boy's mind. It had no defenses, and a quick scan through his memories showed that Potter had no special power at all. Most likely whatever made him capable of vanquishing Lord Voldemort had been used up that Halloween night. He was about to withdraw and make his escape when a brief thought passed through Harry's mind of his friends, the Granger mudblood, the youngest Weasley spawn, and the other potential child of prophecy. And even better, the Longbottom brat was laying completely defenseless, having tried to stop Potter's foolish heroism. Behold how fate favored Lord Voldemort when one of the children prophesied to defeat him, willing walk to his death after having served the other to him a silver platter. Lord Voldemort knew that he could destroy the only ones who could possibly stop him. Taking control of his pitiful host's body, he drank one last dose of unicorn blood to give him the strength he needed to finish his plans. Lord Voldemort was an expert at killing. He knew plenty of ways to kill somebody quickly as well as quite a few to kill somebody slowly, and it was the latter he needed now. For the Hogwarts wards would alert every professor in the castle the very moment a student died. This was part of the ancient magic of the castle, imbued into the stones by the Founders Four. The curse he was planning on using was a rather obscure one which would kill its victim after a time delay of the caster's choice, being virtually undetectable in the meantime. He'd never really used it before. He only discovered it after the Blood War began, and at that point he had preferred openly causing terror and fear to subtle assassinations. Lord Voldemort used a simple body bind on Potter before casting the time delay curse on him. Moving with purpose, he downed the potion to pass through the backward flames. The chess set did not hinder him, his troll was dead, and the flying keys were but a nuisance. He found the mudblood girl trying to load the unconscious Weasley boy onto a broomstick while keeping the devil's snare at bay. With a few waves of his wand, they two were bound in place and doomed to die. Activating the harp once more, Lord Voldemort flew up through the trapdoor on a broomstick, for he had not the magic to spare to use his personal method of flight, and past the Cerberus which dozed at the sound of the music. He cloaked himself in a disillusionment charm and proceeded with great haste to the 7th floor and the entrance of the Gryffindor common room. He knew that any minute Dumbledore would be back, having realized his ruse to get him out of Hogwarts. He was still a professor, or at the very least in the body of one, and so the fat lady granted him immediate entrance. He saw that the near-squib Longbottom was still stuck on the floor under the mudblood's curse. Lord Voldemort doubted that the pitiful wizard in front of him could ever pose more of a threat than a yapping dog, but it was best to be sure. Not bothering with his usual theatrics, he cast the time delay curse for the 4th and last time, before opening a window in Gryffindor Tower, mounting his broom and flying to safety. Lord Voldemort had thrice triumphed this night. The headmaster, rushing carelessly through the traps he and his professors had so carefully constructed, paid little heed to a pair of Gryffindor first-years lying in the devil's snare chamber, only sending a patroness to Minerva and Severus to come help them. Perhaps Voldemort would still be trapped at the Mirror of Erised. Harry heard somebody coming in the distance, Headmaster Dumbledore, he hoped, although it didn't really matter. All he could think was that he'd failed his parents and his friends. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. Ron, Hermione, Neville, I'm sorry. And with a burst of magic, the curses activated. Hogwarts cried out that 4 students died. The headmaster cried in tears at the death of the boy who lived and the impending return of Lord Voldemort. Lord Voldemort cried in triumph as he knew his supposed vanquishers were no more. And then the world shattered. Chapter 2. Back to the beginning. Harry didn't know what to expect in death. He hoped he would get to see his parents again. He really hoped never to see the Dursleys again. But in all of his wildest dreams, he would never have thought that he would be reliving his journey on the Hogwarts Express. One moment he was trapped under a body bind in the mirror chamber, and the next he was sitting in a familiar train compartment, with Ron sitting next to him, Hermione standing at the compartment door, and Neville by her side. Maybe he was reliving his memories, although why this particular memory he had no idea. But Harry knew what she would say next. Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's. Hermione suddenly stopped and looked around. Harry could see that Neville and Ron were also in states of shock. Hermione, Harry asked tentatively. Ron, Neville, are we dead? This broke everyone out of their stupor. Hermione pulled Neville into their compartment, shutting the door behind them with a practiced flick of her wand. What's the last thing you remember? She demanded. Getting knocked out by the chess set, Ron immediately replied. Lying petrified in the common room. Someone hit me with another curse, although I didn't see who, and then the window opened, said Neville. I was on the ground in front of the Mirror of Erised. The stone, I'm sorry. Voldemort got it. The 2 wizards jumped at the name. Don't say the name, Harry, Ron snapped. And what do you mean you know? Who got it? Snape was after it. No, Hermione said. It was Professor Quirrell, not Professor Snape. He attacked us in the devil's snare chamber while I was trying to get you onto a broomstick and back up the trapdoor, Ron. He had some sort of weird face on the back of his head, though. The face was Vald. He saw the flinch again. Fine, you know who. He was possessing Quirrell, and now he has the stone, and it's my fault. What stone? Neville asked. You said there was no time to explain before, but now. Dumbledore was keeping the Philosopher's Stone in the 3rd floor corridor, Hermione explained. The Philosopher's Stone, Neville shouted, as in eternal life lead into gold. Yes, and we thought someone was going to steal it. We actually thought it was Snape, Ron interjected. None of the professors believed us, Harry said sadly. If only Professor McGonagall had listened. If only Headmaster Dumbledore hadn't been lured away, and so we went to get it ourselves first. But in the end, I was the one who managed to get the stone out of the mirror, and then Quirrell just took it. Harry grew more and more agitated. And now we're dead, and you know who has the stone, and it's all because I couldn't leave well enough alone. Harry flinched as Ron raised his hand toward him, but his best friend just gave him a comforting pat on the arm. All three of us agreed to go down there, mate. All of us are at fault. Well, except Neville, he said sheepishly, acknowledging the timid boy's defiance. And we're not necessarily in some sort of afterlife, Hermione said. There are a few other possibilities. This could be some sort of dream, or... Or what, Hermione? Asked Harry. I've read a few books that mention the existence of time magic. It took a bit for them to process just what she was suggesting. It was Neville who got it. You think we've traveled back in time? He asked nervously. But that's impossible. Harry pinched himself. I don't think we're dreaming, and if we've time traveled then. Harry stopped speaking, heard the approach of heavy footsteps. What is it? Ron asked. Malfoy, Harry whispered, and the compartment door slid open again to reveal Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. Is it true? The pale boy said. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yes, Harry answered, echoing what he had said the last time. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, and my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Ron's face twisted into a scowl. Neville shrank into his corner of the compartment to avoid the bully's gaze, and Hermione decided to snicker, drawing Malfoy's attention. Think my name's funny, do you? I don't recognize you, but it's clear who the other two are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford, and that the last Longbottom is a useless squib. How did you manage to get into Hogwarts, anyway, Longbottom? Malfoy turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. Malfoy held out his hand for Harry to shake, but Harry rejected him again. He wouldn't give the pompous bully any respect. I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter, he said slowly. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them, either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you. The last time he'd heard that, it was a throwaway line. But he had fought trolls, seen his parents in the Mirror of Erist, smuggled dragons, faced down wraiths in the Forbidden Forest, and died confronting a professor possessed by Voldemort. And yet, despite the dangers, he would not have abandoned Hermione to the troll or Hagrid to his own foolishness. So he certainly wouldn't betray his parents' memories by befriending the bully Draco Malfoy. He stood up to send Malfoy off, but Ron beat him to the punch. You're a coward and a bully, the redhead spat, and Harry wants no part of you. Even Malfoy seemed momentarily taken aback by the sheer venom spewing from Ron's mouth. Harry supposed a year's worth of aggravation were being unloaded in that single sentence. Recovering quickly, Malfoy gestured to his bodyguards. Oh, you're going to fight us, are you? Hermione was whispering in Neville's ear, and he spoke up for the first time since Malfoy had appeared. Unless you get out now. But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some. Goyle reached for the chocolate frogs, and just like the first time they'd had this confrontation, Scabbers latched onto the brutish boy's finger and refused to let go. Goyle managed to swing Scabbers off of him, and the three Slytherins retreated out of the cabin, leaving the four Gryffindors to themselves once more. We've already established we're not dreaming, Ron said as he got up to shut the compartment, and no self-respecting afterlife would include a visit from Malfoy. So time travel it is. We should let Headmaster Dumbledore know, Hermione declared. He'll know what to do. Would he even believe us? Harry asked. McGonagall's dismissal of them was still fresh in mind. My mum always said that Dumbledore, Ron began. Headmaster Dumbledore, Hermione corrected on reflex. Fine, Headmaster Dumbledore was the wisest and most powerful wizard around. If anyone could figure out what's happening, it's him. As Neville nodded in agreement, an announcement sounded through the train that they'd be arriving at Hogsmeade in 5 minutes. "Oh, Merlin," Ron exclaimed. "We need to change into our school robes." Hermione and Neville got up to return to the compartments, holding their respective trunks. "We can send the headmaster a letter with Hedwig after dinner," Harry suggested quickly, which Hermione and Neville acknowledged quickly before rushing to get changed. "A letter?" Ron asked. "Do you want to be the one to walk up to the staff table, where you know who is sitting, and say we're from the future?" Ron shuddered in fright. "Good point. Now let's get into our robes and get sorted again." Harry would never tire of the view of Hogwarts Castle at night. He let himself enjoy the boat ride with Hagrid before letting himself be led into the antechamber. The ghosts didn't surprise him, nor did the sight of a singing hat. Harry remembered that it could see inside their heads. What would it do with that knowledge? The sorting proceeded as before until it was Hermione's turn. She spent 2 minutes instead of the previous 4 before being placed into Gryffindor. Neville was sorted even faster, spending at most half a minute under the hat. When Harry's turn came, he ignored the whispers from the students with practiced ease, for he was far more concerned about his second encounter with the sorting hat. "The third-time traveler," the voice of the hat spoke into his ear. "I see why my other self would have tried to put you in Slytherin, and you still could do great things there. Don't worry, Mr. Potter. I know that you will do best alongside your friends. You have already shown immense courage, so make the best of your second chance in Gryffindor." Harry accepted the applause of his house, and made sure to give wild applause for Ron's quick sorting to Gryffindor. Listening to Dumbledore warn them of the most painful death, awaiting them in the third-floor corridor, feeling the pain in his scar from looking at the back of Quirrell's head, his heart began to beat faster. He could see Ron was similarly distressed, although Hermione was able to maintain her composure. She quickly began to engage the firsties in conversation about what classes they were looking forward to, making sure to steer the conversation away from defense. Harry mentally thanked her for the temporary distraction. Soon enough, Percy Weasley was guiding them up to Gryffindor Tower. As they passed through the Fat Lady portrait, Harry realized that the last time he was here, he was abandoning Neville to be left for dead on the common room floor. He wouldn't do that again, he promised, and he followed Percy up the familiar flight of stairs to his dorm room. It was good to be home. While Dean and Seamus were quick to go to sleep after an exhausting day, Harry, Ron, and Neville rushed back down to the common area, where Hermione was waiting for them, quills, ink, and parchment already set out. Her brow was furrowed as she held an inked quill over an almost blank parchment, containing just the words, "Dear Headmaster Dumbledore." "Not sure what to write?" Harry asked as he sat down next to his best, well, only female friend. "That's the problem. I know exactly what to write. I was planning out the letter all through dinner, but I can't." "Why can't you?" Ron asked. "You were the one to suggest telling Dumbledore in the first place." "I want to, Ron, but I literally cannot write the words." "Let me try," Harry said, grasping for Hermione's quill, which she handed over. He tried writing. "I've traveled back in time, and I have memories of the future, and even Professor Quirrell is possessed by Voldemort." But each time, the quill froze inches from the parchment, and he could not set it down to begin to write. He knew Voldemort was inside Hogwarts and couldn't tell a single soul. "Neither can I," he said, passing the quill to Ron. "Not even the truth about Quirrell." He saw Ron, and then Neville failed to write anything. "It's like the Fidelius," Neville said quietly. "What's the Fidelius?" Hermione demanded. Neville shrunk back, but Hermione followed up with a softer, "Please. Anything that can help at this point would be amazing." "It's a spell that can hide a place," he spoke haltingly. "Only the secret keeper can tell anyone about it. Even if you know where it is, if you're not the secret keeper, you can't say it. Neville breathed deeply to center himself. In the war, my parents, they hid under the Fidelius. When you know who, when he was defeated, my parents came out of hiding. Harry remembered that Neville had never mentioned his parents, only his grandmother. He knew how touchy a subject his own parents' deaths were, and with a discreet headshake, he warned Ron and Hermione off of asking. Surprisingly, though, Neville told them anyway. The next day, 4 Death Eaters came. They wanted information, tortured them for hours. They're alive, but their minds are gone. Their corner of the common room descended into silence. Harry didn't really know what to say about that, just settling for a whispered, "I'm sorry." Totally inadequate, but a loss like Neville's was beyond mere words. "I want to make them proud, be brave." "All of us were brave last night," said Harry, "especially you, Neville. I was the one to get the stone from the mirror, not Quirrell. Maybe if you had stopped us, if we had listened to you, if we hadn't gone." "No use in what-ifs," said Ron. "Now we need to figure out what to do next." "We need to try verbal," Hermione said. "Our first class should be Transfiguration, so I'll try to tell McGonagall." At Harry's incredulous look, she continued, "Yes, I know she dismissed us last time, but she's still our head of house and the deputy headmistress, and I do respect her." Harry let out a huge yawn, which his friends echoed. "We can't do anything tonight," he said, "and it's been a long time since any of us have slept." At that, the 4 of them proceeded out of the nearly empty common room and quickly succumbed to the comforts of their beds. Reliving the first day of classes was interesting. McGonagall's Transfiguration was first up, and sitting through a rather dry lecture on material he had just spent weeks revising for an exam about was as boring as bins. Even the desk pig transformation was hardly novel. When Hermione went up to the front after class, she stuttered for a moment before asking a question about magical theory. Clearly, she was unable to tell the professor about their time travel. Over the course of that day and into the next, they tried and failed to tell random people about their time travel along with various pieces of future knowledge, ranging from the provocative, like Hagrid getting a dragon egg, to the mundane, like Neville getting a Remembrall in the mail next week. They even tried informing Malfoy of his future detention in the forest. Interestingly, they could have a conversation about future knowledge with other people around, but they wouldn't hear it. Harry and Ron had walked past Fred and George while talking about Hagrid's dragon egg, and they hadn't reacted at all. Hermione even took the risk of walking past the staff table while pondering aloud about the Philosopher's Stone. Neither Quirrell nor Dumbledore had paid her any attention. By the end of 2 days of repeated classes, they were stumped. Hermione had concluded that there was absolutely no way to communicate about the future to anybody else. When Ron brought up the sorting hat, Hermione explained that it had claimed it was magically bound, never to reveal the inner secrets of the students it sorted. The 4 of them were stuck in a rut of reliving boring introductory classes for a few days. Harry managed to answer all of Professor Snape's pop quiz questions and still got points off for thinking himself smarter than his peers. At least Neville managed to avoid melting his cauldron this time around. The weekend came, and the time travelers were even more bored. They managed to finish all of their essays for the week by lunch on Saturday, even Hermione with her tendency to go over the length limit, leaving a day and a half of free time, and the time traveler clique split up. Neville went down to spend some extra time in the greenhouses, and Hermione retreated to the library. Ron wanted to spend some time with his brothers. Harry would have gone flying, were it not for the fact that he hadn't even taken a flying class yet, nor did he have his broom. Instead, he found an abandoned classroom near Gryffindor Tower and took to practicing all of the few defensive spells he had learned from Quirrell. The possessed man was not a good professor, but he had taught them a few things, and Harry refused to let himself be caught defenseless again. The door to the classroom burst open, and Harry spun around to point his wand at the intruder. When he saw it was just Ron, he relaxed, though his friend was looking very excited. "I figured it out," he shouted. "What?" Harry asked. The only thing for them to figure out was how to tell somebody about Quirrell and the stone, but Hermione had said it was impossible. How to expose Quirrell. "We can't tell anyone," Harry reminded him. "No, but I was listening to Fred and George plan a prank, and they were talking about vanishing all the pumpkin juice at the Slytherin table. They decided against it, but it would work for us." Harry was still confused, and he gestured for Ron to continue. "All we need to do is vanish Quirrell's turban in front of Dumbledore. Then Dumbledore will see, whose face, and take him down." "That's brilliant, actually." It really was. Once Dumbledore saw underneath Quirrell's turban, he'd easily take down the weakened Dark Lord and the man he was possessing. There was only one problem. Do any of us know how to vanish something? Ron thought for a moment. "I'll convince the twins to do it. Call it a huge prank. They'd be all for it." Harry was eager to see it happen, but he remembered the last time he had rushed into something. "We should let Hermione and Neville know first," he said. Of course," Ron agreed, bouncing on his feet. "I'll go get Neville if you get Hermione." It was blatantly obvious where both of them would be, and Harry quickly found her at her usual table with a pile of advanced books. Helping her carry them back to the dorm, he explained Ron's idea on the way. "It's the best idea I think we'll get," Hermione said after Harry finished the explanation. "I'm all for it." By the time Hermione had taken her books up to her dorm room, Ron was back with Neville, who was frowning. "Your idea was great," she exclaimed as she saw Ron. "It's the perfect way to solve everything." "I was telling Ron that I'm not so sure," Neville interrupted. "Why not?" Harry asked. "If we're exposing Quirrell in front of all the teachers, it's also in front of all the students." Harry's eyes widened and he groaned. "You're right. But it's the most skilled and knowledgeable wizards and witches in Britain against one weakened dark wizard and the host he's possessing," Hermione argued. "They'll win easily." "Dumbledore will beat him before he can even lift his wand," Ron added. "I still am against the idea," Neville said. "The professors aren't perfect, and it's way too risky." "I am for it," Ron answered stubbornly. "It will work." Hermione weighed the options for a moment. "I still am for it. It's the best way." The three of them turned toward Harry. If he listened to Neville, who was right about going to the Forbidden Corridor, and voted against the idea, they'd be tied. If he listened to Ron and Hermione, who were his best friends, then Neville would be outvoted 3-1. But in the end, one thing made his decision firm. "I won't be taught defense by Voldemort." They all shuddered for another year. "I'm sorry, Neville, but I am for the idea." "I really hope it works," Neville said nervously before heading back out of the common room, presumably to return to the greenhouses. "I hope so, too." On Monday evening, Ron let them know that he'd talked the twins into vanishing the turban. They all sat angled towards the staff table, prepared to witness the hopefully short battle between two powerful wizards. Just as they'd finished serving themselves dessert, the purple fabric disappeared from Quirrell's head. Dumbledore turned toward the professor in jovial surprise, which morphed into abject shock, which in turn morphed into utter fury as he withdrew his wand and shot a flurry of binding spells at the professor. But it was too late. When the turban vanished, Lord Voldemort knew he was exposed and decided to go out with at least one victory. Taking control of his host, he shot a killing curse toward the Potter brat, the boy who lived. And Harry could do nothing but watch in horror as the green light of his nightmares sped towards him to end his life. The curse hit him, and he died instantly, experiencing agony as his soul was torn free of his body. And then the world shattered. Chapter 3: The Waiting Game. "Has anyone seen a toad again, Harry?" Harry regained awareness at the sound of Hermione's voice. He looked around. He was on the express for the third time. "Are you all right?" Hermione asked. I'm fine, he responded. I think, although I also think I died again. He turned to Neville. I'm sorry, Neville, you were right, again. New rule, Ron said. Neville is always right. I don't want to see my best friend die again. Neville looked a bit shocked at Ron's proclamation. I'm probably not always, he began to protest. You were right about the corridor, Harry said. You tried to warn us about Draco knowing about the dragon, Hermione pointed out. And had we listened to you instead of my oh-so-brilliant idea, Harry wouldn't have gotten killed, Ron finished bitterly. Whatever that curse was, Harry said, it was painful. But let's try to look on the bright side if there is one. We get another chance, Hermione exclaimed. In fact, we get as many chances as we need. What do you mean? Asked Ron. I think somehow we're in a time loop, she explained. Her tone tried to remain solemn, but Harry could tell she was feeling excited. Any time that, well, Harry dies, she glanced over at Harry. The four of us reset to this moment in time. Harry wasn't sure what to think about that. The boy who lived, indeed, if he couldn't ever really die without turning back time. Why now? Neville asked. Of all times, why right now? Hermione looked like she was turning the question over in her mind, but it was Ron who figured it out. The first time the four of us met, he explained. You're right, Harry said. I'd met Neville on the platform. And then again, when he came in to look for Trevor alone, Ron added. And Neville and I had met up beforehand, but this was the first time the four of us were all together, Hermione confirmed. And the four of us are the only ones to remember the future, Neville added. The loop is all centered on us. Harry let out a short laugh. Imagine what Professor Snape would say about that. Ron chuckled. 20 points from Gryffindor for thinking the world centers on you, he said, imitating Snape's drawl. Except it actually does. Neville broke down in laughter as well, as did Hermione after giving a small frown of disapproval at their making fun of a professor. Harry immediately sobered when he realized what, or rather who, was about to arrive. Malfoy incoming, he warned, and they straightened up to meet Malfoy for the first time, for the third time. The confrontation of the four of them against Malfoy and his goons played out exactly the same as it had in their second train encounter, and after Scabbers' attack, the once and future Slytherins fled, leaving them alone once more. We need to change, Hermione said, but first we need to figure out what to do this time. As per our new rule, what do you think, Neville? Neville thought for a few minutes before declaring, we should do nothing. Nothing, Harry asked. Exposing who got you killed. Going for the stone got all of us killed, and we can't tell anybody. So we just have to trust that the defenses hold without our interference and keep our heads down around Quirrell. Not even Hermione would demand using the proper title for the possessed teacher. Do nothing it is, then, Harry agreed. The 5-minute warning came once again, and Hermione and Neville rushed to change into their robes. Harry's third sorting, and his second in just over a week, was not interesting at all. The hat sent all four of them into Gryffindor in less than 30 seconds, giving them only small encouragements in their quest to survive. Harry refused to let Quirrell's presence in the Great Hall bother him. It would be a long, long year otherwise. As he went to sleep for his first night at Hogwarts, he hoped that passivity would work and that the professors would keep him safe. I'm going to teach myself the second-year material, Hermione declared as they went down to breakfast. You're welcome to join me. No, thanks, Ron declined. I don't want to do more schoolwork than necessary. School will be a breeze, and that just leaves me more time to have fun. Harry and Neville agreed with Ron, and Hermione just shook her head. If you change your mind, the offer remains open. A week and a half later, the three boys approached Hermione's usual library table. Is that offer still open? Ron asked. Hermione gestured to the 3 empty chairs she had placed around her table, and they each took a seat. I thought it would take until October for you to change your mind, she said. Doing the same lessons for the third time is incredibly boring, said Harry. And even I can only play so many games of chess in a row, added Ron. My parents would be disappointed if I didn't use the opportunity to become a good wizard like them, said Neville. Besides, any plants that I try to grow, all my effort will be undone if the loop resets. All right then, Hermione said. So far, I've been reading up on the theory behind second-year charms, starting with. Over the next few weeks, the four of them developed a system that let them self-teach the second-year curriculum. Hermione, of course, was the master of all book knowledge, and a year of helping Ron and Harry study meant that she was able to explain the concepts in a way that made sense to the two boys. It didn't take long for her to get a pulse on how Neville learned. She asked her parents for resources on Muggle methods to improve memory, and she was able to help Neville extend his prodigious memory for plants to other subjects. Indeed, when it came to herbology, Neville proved that he was probably the best student in the subject in their year, if not the entire school. He shared his encyclopedic knowledge of the subject with his friends. Under Hermione's kind tutelage, instead of Professor Snape's sneers and insults, he developed a level of skill in potions that surprised all four of them, until they remembered that most potions' ingredients came from Neville's beloved plants. In contrast, Harry probably would have stopped learning potions were it not for Hermione's insistence that they cover every subject. Instead, he showed a strong affinity for spellcasting, especially defensive spells. His favorite was Expelliarmus, the disarming charm, but he developed a wide repertoire with Hermione's encouragement. When his friends struggled in their own spellcasting, he was usually able to help them figure out what they were doing wrong. His other contribution was perhaps even more important. He taught his friends how to hide their true level of knowledge from the teachers. It was a skill he'd had to pick up at the Dursleys. Harry was no genius, but he was forced to do worse than Dudley, which meant intentionally staying just at the boundary between passing and failing. All of his friends, especially Hermione, were appalled when he told them this, but they agreed to follow his advice and stay uninteresting to Quirrell and you-know-who. As for Ron, well, he had no particular skill in any subject, but there were two things he excelled at: finding creative uses for spells, like when he had the idea to levitate the Troll's Club, and keeping Hermione from overworking them by insisting on taking breaks to have fun. The battle between Ron and Hermione was ongoing, but Harry thought they usually managed to strike a good balance. But their private studies didn't mean that the events happening in Hogwarts stopped. When Neville got his Remembrall, Harry wondered if he'd get onto the Quidditch team again. After all, Neville had gained basic competence on a broom over a year of flying classes, so he wouldn't get injured and drop the glass ball like last time. Indeed, the first flying class went far more smoothly than it had the first time, until Madame Hooch gave them permission to fly freely for the last 15 minutes. While the flying instructor was distracted, dealing with a collision between two novice flyers, Ron whispered something in Neville's ear, and soon the latter let the Remembrall fall, accidentally, out of his pocket. Malfoy, of course, couldn't resist the chance to be a bully and stole it, giving Harry a chance to show off his seeker skills and earn his spot on the team once more. "Thank you," he said to Neville, as he passed the Remembrall back to its owner at dinner. "It wasn't a problem at all," he said. "It's not like this stupid thing was ever actually useful anyway. Besides, it was Ron's idea." "I knew Malfoy would take the bait," he crowed, "and you got your spot back. Speaking of Malfoy, he's going to challenge you to a duel tonight, Harry," Hermione reminded them. "In fact, here he comes." Harry traded insults with Malfoy on autopilot, letting Ron accept the duel on his behalf. "We need to practice our singing voices," he commented as Malfoy left. "Singing voices?" Ron asked before his eyes widened. "Oh, for Fluffy." "Fluffy?" Neville asked, and Harry realized he'd never heard the full story about Hagrid. "The Cerberus," said Harry. "Wait a minute," Hermione spoke up. You're really going to go out for the stupid duel when Malfoy won't even show up, she had a point. Why bother falling for Malfoy's trap? Still, it wasn't his decision to make. Neville, what do you think? Why do I have to make all the decisions? He complained. Because the rest of us make bad ones, Ron suggested. Then I don't particularly fancy running away from Filch and toward Fluffy tonight. No duel it is then, Harry agreed. After spending a wonderful night of sleeping in their beds and not encountering a giant three-headed dog, they were pleased to see Malfoy's surprise that they'd avoided getting into trouble. Harry got his Nimbus 2000 once more, quickly stashing it in his bag to avoid the scrutiny of the hall. Honestly, Hermione muttered, what was Professor McGonagall thinking? The package was obviously a broomstick delivered to you in the middle of the Great Hall. She could have just handed to you in private. Harry let Ron handle the trading of barbs with Malfoy. Honestly, the red-headed boy seemed to enjoy it, while it just reminded Harry of his decade of getting insulted and belittled by the Dursleys. As the rest of September and all of October passed, he enjoyed wowing Oliver Wood with his Quidditch skills and getting to know his best friends better, especially incorporating Neville into the trio dynamic. Of course, the passage time moved them ever closer to the next critical point of their first year. When they woke up to the smell of baking pumpkins, they knew that it was Halloween. In charms, they relearned the levitation charm. Ron decided to mispronounce the incantation, giving Hermione the chance to correct him. It's no wonder you have so many friends, he said to her, since you're so helpful and kind. Hermione blushed at the compliment, and Harry smiled to hear Ron correcting his mistake that put Hermione in danger last time. Feeling nostalgic, he teased Ron as they left the classroom. I know I'm not the best with emotions, Ron admitted, but with how much she's helped us, she deserved an apology, and what better time and place to do it. The quartet's joyous energy from charms dwindled as the afternoon passed, and for the first time, Harry was genuinely grateful for Professor Binns' soporific tones in history. But even that came to an end, and they had a decision to make. If you're confident you can do it, you should fight the troll, Neville said. Really? Harry asked. Neville was the group's voice of prudence, so Iffy thought it was a good idea. It's a danger to the school, he argued, since the professors will be searching the dungeons and all of us students were in a panicked stampede back to our dorms. All right, Hermione said. We'll skip the feast and fight the troll. Skip the feast, Ron complained half-heartedly. Don't worry, said Hermione. If it's like last time, there will be food in the common room once we're done. What will be our excuse for not being there? Harry asked. Last time, I was shocked they believed Hermione off. All people decided to go troll fighting for fun. Ron chuckled at remembering Hermione's audacious lie. They walked in silence for a few minutes as they tried to come up with a convincing lie. I have an idea, Ron said with an apologetic look toward Harry, but you won't like it. What is it? He asked, and when he heard what his best friend had to say, he wasn't sure how to react. I mean, you're not wrong, he eventually decided. We'll go for it. When the rest of their housemates left to join the Halloween feast, the four-time travelers chose to wander the halls, making their way in the general direction of the first-floor bathroom. You know, Harry, Hermione said softly, Halloween is traditionally the day that we remember those who aren't with us anymore. They meandered in silence through the halls, and Harry took the time to remember the loving faces he saw in the mirror. I saw my parents in the mirror of Erest, he said aloud in a soft voice, just above a whisper. Ron was with me. It's the only time I've ever seen an image of them. You know, I don't even know if their faces were real or if they were just products of my imagination. The Dursleys had taught him from an early age that crying would only get him locked in the cupboard. Even when he saw his parents in the mirror, even in the aftermath of the encounter with Voldemort's wraith in the forest, even when he was left for dead by Voldemort in the mirror chamber, Harry hadn't shed a tear. But now, with true friends around him, he let himself shed tears for his parents. Harry let his friends give him comfort as they continued their walk towards the first floor. But soon enough, he heard a commotion in the distance and smelled the unmistakable stench of mountain troll. He straightened his back, wiped the tears from his eyes, readjusted his grip on his wand, and focused his mind on the task ahead. "It's time," he whispered, though he hardly needed to do so. They turned a corner and saw the troll lumbering toward them, sniffing the air. It had caught their scent. "Merlin," Neville exclaimed as he backed away. "It's enormous." "Yeah," Ron said, his tone clipped. The troll raised its massive club toward them. "Let's get that club away from him," Harry ordered. "In 3, 2, 1. Wingardium Leviosa," the four of them chanted in unison. Their combined magical strength wrenched the massive wooden weapon out of the beast's hand and into the ceiling. As Harry guided the club over its head, the troll gazed up at the levitating weapon rather stupidly. "Now," he commanded, and they let the club drop with a sickening crack onto the troll's head. It swayed and then fell flat on its face, causing a resounding boom to echo through the hallway. Harry collapsed on the floor in exhaustion, while the others managed to find a wall to lean upon. "It's not dead, right?" Neville asked. "Just knocked out." "That's how it was last time," Hermione confirmed. "At least there's no troll snot involved," Harry joked. Loud footsteps made the four of them look up. The professors had finally arrived at the site of the commotion. Professor McGonagall burst into the hallway, closely followed by Snape, with Quirrell bringing up the rear. The possessed professor looked at the troll, and his legs gave out as he faked clutching his heart. As Snape bent over the troll, Professor McGonagall looked at the four of them angrily. "What on earth were you thinking of?" she demanded. "You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory?" "Our dormitory?" Hermione asked, her face a perfect picture of a nervous teacher's pet. "I know we were supposed to be at the feast, but—" "You weren't at the feast?" she asked, surprised. "Why ever not?" "Potter probably thought eating with the masses was too good for him," Snape opined with a sneer. "For your information, Professor Snape," Ron spat, not having to fake his anger at the biased professor, "Harry didn't particularly want to celebrate the anniversary of his parents' murders, and we didn't want him to be alone. We were wandering in the general direction of the hall to get some food," Hermione added to explain why they were on the first floor. The two professors, Quirrell didn't count as one, were both taken aback. "Merlin," McGonagall exclaimed, "I didn't even realize what tonight meant for you, Mr. Potter. For the rest of us, it's a celebration of you-know-whose defeat, but it's also the night that James and Lily, I think sometimes we forget that. Now how on earth did first years defeat a troll?" Harry took up the explanation, trying to stay calm despite his nervousness. Although, unlike what the professors most likely thought, it was not McGonagall's stern presence, but Voldemort's deadly gaze that made him so. Neville spotted it first. Not technically a lie, he was the first one around the corner this time, and Ron remembered the levitation charm from class today. He had the idea to levitate the club, again, true if not in this time, and we all cast the spell together. When the troll was under its club, we let it go. And so, he gestured to the end result. "You were extraordinarily lucky," McGonagall said, "but not many first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll. You each win Gryffindor 5 points for sheer, dumb luck. Now back to Gryffindor Tower with all of you." When they were sure they were out of the earshot of the teachers, they broke into wide smiles. "We did it," Ron exclaimed, "and got 20 points instead of 5. "Do you think you know who will do anything about this?" Neville asked. "He didn't last time," Hermione said, "and if we stay out of trouble, this will be a one-off incident of sheer dumb luck, as McGonagall put it." When they reached the fat lady, Harry paused. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "Thank you all." Ron turned to him with a curious look. "For what?" "For helping me mourn my parents for the first time." "You're absolutely welcome," Hermione said. You're my best friend, all of ours. Chapter 4. Dragon Smuggling for Pros. Playing Quidditch on a bucking broomstick wasn't exactly pleasant, but Harry knew how to handle it better. He still caught the snitch, albeit in his hand this time, and he was told later that Hermione had set Snape on fire again. All we have is Quirrell's word that Snape was innocent, she explained, and besides, it's best to stick with what works. Harry wondered if her real motivation was a bit of petty revenge against the horrible professor that she could justify to herself. Time moved inevitably on, and as Christmas approached, Hermione had a special surprise. I remember that last time both of you had to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas, she said. I wrote to my parents, and they agreed to let me have friends over for break. The offer's open to you as well, Neville. That sounds amazing, Harry said with a smile. Hogwarts Christmas was great, but spending it with Hermione sounded even better. Besides, he kind of missed the Muggle world, having not been there in well over a year from his perspective. I'm sure I can frame it the right way to get the Dursleys' permission. I'd love to come, Neville said, but my Gran will want me home over break. I haven't seen her in so long. What about you, Ron? Asked Harry. Are you up for a Muggle Christmas? Absolutely. I'm sure Mum and Dad won't mind. I'll just have to be sure to give my brothers their presents before we go. Indeed, both the Dursleys and the Weasleys gave their approval, and so Harry and Ron spent December feeling growing excitement for Christmas break. The time passed without incident, except for when they saw that the twins had enchanted snowballs to hit Voldemort's face. I'd forgotten about that, said Ron worriedly after they saw the prank. I honestly cannot believe they survived hitting you-know-who in the face. Nothing happened to them last time, Neville comforted him, and I think he has far more things to worry about than a minor prank. They'll be fine. The term ended, and the four of them enjoyed a smooth and Malfoy-free train ride back to London. Neville introduced them to his grandmother before the pair took the flu back to their home, leaving the trio to pass through the barrier to King's Cross to meet Hermione's parents. Thank you for having us, Mr. and Mrs. Granger, Harry said politely, and Ron echoed him. It's a pleasure to host Hermione's friends, Mr. Granger said. Now we have a long car ride ahead of us, so we should get going. The Grangers and Harry spent the car ride bemusedly, explaining various Muggle things to the amazed Ron, from skyscrapers to billboards to traffic lights. At least it only took a few minutes to correct the mispronunciation of electricity he'd learned from his father. By the time they reached the Granger home, Ron was probably in the top 10% of all purebloods when it came to understanding Muggles, a testament both to Ron's ability to learn quickly when he wanted to, and to the complete and utter ignorance of the wizarding community on the subject of the mundane. With no need to figure out Nicola's flame, this Christmas was far more relaxing than their last one. They spent 2 weeks exposing Ron to Muggle culture. He particularly enjoyed Star Wars, getting to know what Hermione was like outside of school, still a voracious bookworm. But she also enjoyed playing the piano and enjoying the Grangers cooking Mr. Granger made an excellent Christmas ham that kept them fed for a week. And most of all, they got to enjoy 2 weeks without the quite literal specter of Voldemort hanging over their heads. On Christmas Day, the trio opened their presents. Harry got all the same presents as last time. An owl from Mrs. Weasley delivered his emerald green Weasley sweater and a box of delicious homemade fudge that he was looking forward to enjoying again. Hermione also got a sweater this time, a navy blue one, as thanks for hosting Ron over the holidays. From Hagrid, he got the wood flute. Perhaps he would actually take the time to learn how to play it, even if he wouldn't need to use it on Fluffy. He'd already gotten his 50 pence from the Dursleys, along with their permission to stay with the Grangers. Hermione had gotten both Ron and Harry some wizarding candy like she had before, horrifying her dentist parents. The elder Grangers gave their daughter several books and had managed to find last-minute gifts for the boys. A copy of The Lord of the Rings for Harry, who had mentioned he'd never read the book but had always wanted to, and a guide to Muggle electronics for Ron, who had expressed his fascination with the subject. And mysteriously sitting under the tree was the package containing the Potter invisibility cloak. They still had no clue who had sent it to Harry and then returned it later after he'd lost it smuggling Norbert, although they presumed it was one of the professors. The Grangers loved seeing some actual magic in action, and all of them tried on the cloak before Harry stored it away in his trunk. "Do you regret it?" Ron asked that night in the guest bedroom they were sharing. "Not staying at Hogwarts, you could have seen your parents again in the mirror." "Dumbledore told me something. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. The mirror didn't really give me happiness, not once it was taken away. I'll be glad never to encounter it again." "Let's hope," Ron said. When Harry fell asleep, he dreamt of seeing his parents' faces. It was a pleasant dream, and it passed in the ethereal nothingness to which all dreams eventually return. School began once more, and the snows of winter eventually faded into the greenery of spring. Harry made his 5-minute catch of the snitch like before, but he did not follow Snape into the forbidden forest. The quartet saw Quirrell growing paler and shakier as the possession took its toll on his body. Harry mentally apologized to the unicorns that would be killed to keep the evil man alive, but there was nothing he could do. One day, soon after Easter break, Harry and Hermione were in the library grabbing some books on second-year transfiguration when they saw a very familiar person sneaking around in the dragon section. "Hagrid, what are you doing in the library?" Harry asked, although he already knew. It was time to hatch Norbert. Neville had agreed that it was safe enough to help Hagrid so long as they remembered to put their invisibility cloak back on this time. "Just looking," he said in a shifty voice. "You studying hard for your exams?" "And reading ahead," Hermione said proudly. "Good for you. Now, you and your friends should come and see me later. I've got something to show you." The quartet made it to Hagrid's hut an hour later. Having never expressed an interest in the stone this time around, they avoided the awkward conversation about the stone's protections, and Neville got to see the dragon egg for the first time. Hagrid explained that he'd won it in a game of cards with a stranger. The stranger they knew was Quirrell in disguise, looking for a way past Fluffy. "Hagrid, you live in a wooden house," Hermione said when Hagrid revealed his plans to hatch the egg, but as before, Hagrid didn't listen. A few weeks later, Hedwig brought the note from Hagrid saying that the egg was hatching. Knowing exactly when the egg would hatch and not wanting to anger Neville by skipping his favorite class, they all went to herbology before swinging by Hagrid's hut during morning break. They waited with bated breath as the egg cracked open and the baby dragon flopped onto the table. "Isn't he beautiful?" Hagrid murmured as the baby sneezed out sparks. They'd acted with a bit more discretion about the dragon, but still, Hermione spotted Malfoy trying to peek into Hagrid's window, and they knew that Norbert had to go. While Ron sent off a letter to his brother Charlie, the others informed Hagrid that Malfoy knew about the dragon and convinced him to send it away before it got too big. Charlie, of course, agreed to take the dragon, and on the appointed night, Harry and Hermione snuck Norbert up to the tallest tower in Hogwarts. Through a combination of featherlight charms, levitation charms, and several weeks of practice in moving under the invisibility cloak, the pair were able to make the journey from Hagrid's hut to the top of the tower in 10 minutes. They heard McGonagall giving Draco detention in the distance, but they didn't stop to listen. As they reached the top of the tower, they waited in silence for Charlie's friends to arrive, and soon enough, 4 broomsticks came bearing familiar dragon handlers. They moved quickly to load Norbert's crate into its harness and watched as the baby dragon flew off into the distance. Remembering to put the cloak back on, they slipped down the stairs and past Filch, at which point they had a straight shot to the fat lady's portrait. They were safe. No detention, no encounter with Voldemort in the forest, nothing to worry about for the rest of the year, except exams they'd already taken once before. Despite that fact, Hermione still set them on a 2-week study schedule for their exams. "You have no excuse to get anything less than straight O's this time," she declared. "What about?" Harry began. "Snape," Hermione guessed. "I know he wouldn't give you an O even if you brewed the most perfect potion in class, but you better not get a single thing wrong on the written." Harry didn't know how he managed to get through his exams last time around when he was worrying about the stone nonstop. This time, while he was still worried, he hoped that the protections on the mirror would hold. Professor Dumbledore was the greatest wizard alive, everyone said, and if he could not keep the stone safe, then nobody could. Their last exam was History of Magic, an hour of answering questions about various famous wizards and witches, few of whom Harry remembered actually hearing about from the ghost professor. The four of them wandered around by the lake, letting Hermione talk their ears about the exams they had just taken, enjoying the sunshine and the beautiful blue sky. Harry remembered that this was when he'd had the realization that set him on the path to go through the trapdoor, leading to his first death. "It was tonight," he said aloud. "Tonight was the night we made the worst decision of our lives, the night that you-know-who will try to get the stone." "Have you changed your mind?" Neville asked warily. "No, I'm staying in the dorms tonight. But if he succeeds, will he come for the boy who lived? And for you, Neville, we never did figure out why he went out of his way to attack you tonight." Hermione laughed. "What's so funny?" Ron asked. "Just that the sentence Harry said would make no sense were it not for time travel," she explained. All of them chuckled in good humor at the bizarreness that was their lives. "We're keeping our wands out tonight," said Harry, "just in case." The night exams ended. The twins threw a huge party in the common room, and not being pariahs or doing last-minute preparation to go after the stone, Harry and his friends were able to fully join in. They hung out with their yearmates, ate lots of candy, and tried a really interesting drink called butterbeer. But eventually it got late, and more students filtered up the stairs to go to bed. Ron claimed a table near the corner of the common room for the quartet. "Sitting here," Ron explained his choice. "I'll be able to see if the portrait door opens, but Quirrell won't immediately be looking at us when he enters. Now I've got my chess set, because we have a long night ahead of us." Midnight came, and then 1 in the morning. Ron was firmly in the lead in their impromptu chess tournament, with Hermione in a distant second. Neither Harry nor Neville seemed to have a knack for the game. Eventually, they grew bored of the game, and Harry pulled out the flute he'd gotten from Hagrid, playing his friends a few of the pieces he'd been learning. The Grangers had taken the time to find some flute sheet music and owled it to Harry. He'd finished one piece and was about to start a second when he felt a sharp pain in his scar. It had been bothering him a little throughout exams, but it was far less noticeable than the first time, so he'd ignored it. Now, though, it was even worse than when he'd encountered Voldemort in the forest. "Are you all right?" Ron asked as he gripped Harry's arm, guiding him to lay down on a sofa. "My scar was in pain," he said, "but it's better now," which it was. The pain was merely burning instead of a hot knife stabbing through his skull. "Be on guard," Ron ordered, and Hermione and Neville drew their wands to stand watch while Ron cared for Harry. Over the next few minutes, the pain subsided enough for Harry to sit up. "What do you think it meant?" Hermione asked. "I hope it means he failed," Neville suggested, "but he might come for Harry to cut his losses." They waited with bated breath for nearly an hour, their wands trained on the portrait door. But it never opened, and the pain in Harry's scar faded to the lowest level it had ever been in Hogwarts. "I think he's gone from the castle," he told his friends, "for better or for worse." Neville yawned. "In that case, I want to go to sleep." "Keep your hand on your wand, though," Ron ordered, "just in case." The next morning, 4 tired first-year Gryffindors made their way to the Great Hall for breakfast, where Professor Quirrell was notably absent and the other professors were agitated. Towards the end of the meal, Dumbledore stood up to make an announcement. Unfortunately, Professor Quirrell has had to take his leave of Hogwarts early. Do not fear, for your defense exams will be graded on time. The other students looked confused, but the time travelers knew what had happened. Quirrell and Voldemort were finally gone from Hogwarts, and for the first time since they had first gone back in time, they were free to breathe easily within Hogwarts walls. Harry took advantage of that freedom to fly as much as he could in preparation for the final Quidditch match of the season, the one due to happen the day after Quirrell's departure. The Gryffindor chasers were well matched against Ravenclaw, but the Weasley twins were simply the superior beaters, and Harry was able to outfly the Ravenclaw seeker to snatch the golden snitch after 2 hours and earn Gryffindor the Quidditch Cup. As he celebrated the win with his teammates and his house, Harry got an unexpected message, a note from Dumbledore asking Harry to meet him in his office. Outside of the single meeting at the Mirror, which technically had never happened, Harry had only ever seen the headmaster at mealtimes. As far as he knew, Harry had done absolutely nothing to warrant being called to such a meeting. Maybe it's about the dragon, Ron suggested nervously. Who would have told? Harry asked. Hagrid may be loose-mouthed, but I don't think he would rat us out when we helped him, not even to Dumbledore. Just go see the headmaster, Hermione said reassuringly. It will be fine. Following the directions in the note, he spoke the password, chocolate frogs, to the gargoyle guarding the office and rode the rotating spiral staircase up to the office. Come in, my boy, the elder wizard called as he approached the door. Why do you want to meet me? Harry asked shakily. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, Harry, the headmaster said genially. I make it a point to check in with those students of mine who are facing challenges. And this year, not only did you have to re-enter the wizarding world, but deal with your fame as the boy who lived. It was annoying at first when everyone wanted a look at my scar, headmaster, but eventually it died down. Or maybe I just learned to ignore it. It is good that you're not letting your fame go to your head. Harry, have you been enjoying your time at Hogwarts otherwise? I've enjoyed my classes mostly, and I've made a few good friends. The old headmaster smiled. I'm glad you're enjoying your time here. When you are as old as I am, you'll look back on your Hogwarts days and wish they'd lasted longer. Dumbledore looked like he was reminiscing. Forgive an old man his nostalgia. Now there is one other matter we must discuss. As you may know, Harry, as much as your status as the boy who lived makes you a hero to most of our society, those of a darker inclination consider you one of their greatest enemies. I know, sir. The Slytherins have made that quite clear. I implore you not to judge those children too harshly for repeating their parents' views, but there are those who wish you harm far greater than schoolyard taunting. Because of this, I set up a powerful ward upon your aunt's house, based on the blood of your mother, who gave her life for you that fateful night. So long as you call the place where your mother's blood dwells home, Voldemort, and those who follow him cannot touch you there. While it is good that you have friends who are willing to have you over, you must remain at Privet Drive as much as possible to keep this protection strong. Harry's eyes widened at the revelation. At least it explained why he was put with the Dursleys and not in any wizarding home. I understand, sir. Very well. Enjoy your last day at Hogwarts, Harry, and have a good summer. Oh, and congratulations on bringing the Quidditch Cup back to Gryffindor. Thank you, sir. His friends were waiting for him at the base of the stairs to the headmaster's office, and Harry gave them a smile to reassure them he was fine. The headmaster just wanted to talk to me about my school year and tell me about a protection on the Dursleys' house. He continued to tell his friends about the blood protection, as Dumbledore had explained it to him. So don't expect me to come visit any of you this summer, but I'll be writing tons of letters with Hedwig. Harry hoped his summer would be short. Chapter 5, Defiant. With no deductions for the dragon incident and the points from winning the Quidditch Cup, the Gryffindors got to enjoy a red and gold leaving feast, but the celebration that evening was short as everyone needed to get ready to head out in the morning. The ride back to London was enjoyable, but soon enough they were pulling into platform 9 3/4, and Harry was about to go back to the Dursleys for the first time in almost 2 years, from his perspective. "Thank you so much for an awesome first year," he said to all his friends as they stepped the train. "It was so much better than the last one." Waiting to be let out into King's Cross, Harry got to meet Neville's grandmother, as well as Ron's parents and excitable little sister Ginny. "Ready, are you?" Uncle Vernon asked, as he spotted Harry walking through the barrier with Hermione. "You must be Harry's family," Mr. Granger exclaimed. "In a manner of speaking," said Uncle Vernon. "Hurry up, boy, we haven't got all day." "Good luck, Harry, and stay safe," Hermione wished him. "That uncle of his was most unpleasant," Hermione's mom noted. "Harry doesn't much enjoy being there, but he most certainly can anywhere else." While Hermione was giving her parents an edited version of her first year and the story of Harry Potter, minus time travel, Harry was tuning out his uncle's rants and conveniently forgetting to mention that he wasn't allowed to do magic over the summer. A few nights into his summer, Harry started having dreams. They showed him bad news, the worst, really. Quirrell had managed to escape with the Mirror of Erist, fleeing to a manor that housed a wizard that looked like an adult version of Draco Malfoy, probably the Slytherin boy's father. He saw Quirrell and the elder Malfoy examine the enchantments on the mirror and discover how the stone could be retrieved. Somebody who wanted the stone, but not to use it, could draw it forth from the mirror. Since Malfoy Jr. could be convinced to want the stone only to give to Voldemort and not to use himself, he qualified. The Philosopher's Stone, the most powerful and valuable artifact in the magical world, was in the hands of magic's greatest enemy. After a few dreams, Harry wrote to his friends about what he was witnessing at night. While they were all concerned, Ron suggested telling the headmaster, although he wouldn't share Harry's secret without his permission. Seeing as Dumbledore was considered the wisest and most powerful wizard alive, Harry saw no problems with that. It ended up being a mistake. He woke up in the middle of the night to see Hedwig tapping at his window urgently. Letting her in, he untied the small piece of paper attached to her leg. "Harry," the note read in Hermione's cursive, less neat than usual. "Ron told Headmaster Dumbledore about your dreams. For some reason, he immediately ordered that Ron stop all contact with you and to keep Hedwig at the Burrow. That's the Weasley house. He sent the news along to me via Hedwig. We both think you should at least know why the letters have stopped suddenly. Please send Hedwig directly to the Burrow once you get this. If you need any help, I've written my phone number and my address on the back, even though you already know the second one. Take care, Hermione." Harry wasn't quite sure what to do with that. After sending Hedwig on her way, he copied down the phone number and address in a few places, lest the Dursleys destroy the original letter out of spite. Without a constant stream of letters from his friends, Harry was left with the hatred of his aunt, uncle, and cousin during the day, and Voldemort's malicious glee blasting at his dreams all night. At least he got some educational lessons in alchemy, specifically the art of creating the elixir of life from the Philosopher's Stone. When he went to bed a few days before his birthday, he saw that the Dark Lord had finished at last. The elixir was brewed, and Quirrell immediately looked better upon drinking some. The curse of Unicorn's blood was cleared from his system. Over the next few nights, he felt Voldemort and Quirrell gradually gain strength until, in a horrific scene that Harry would never ever describe to anyone, not even his closest friends, the parasitic possessor separated from his host and into his own body. On July 30, Harry was barely functioning between the horror of his parents' murderer, the wizarding world's nightmare returned to life, and the shame that he had just let it happen. We're 11 years old, he tried to comfort himself. 12 if you count the time travel. We tried to stop it and couldn't. The professor's defenses should have been enough. Yet Harry couldn't shake the feeling there was something he could have done, something he should have done. The night before his birthday, he was afraid to go to sleep and bear witness to the cruelty of a fully resurrected Voldemort. But well after midnight, exhaustion caught up with him, and fall asleep he did. Welcome back, my faithful servants, my Death Eaters. Dozens of masked wizards, Death Eaters, Harry supposed, were assembled in a grand meeting room, with Voldemort seated upon a beautiful, bejeweled chair in front of them. For over 10 years, you have sat by and plead bewitchment and denied your true loyalties. For over 10 years, you have enjoyed freedom and pleasure while I languished. For over 10 years, you have let Dumbledore's word be law, let the Minister of Magic be nothing more than one of the old fool's lackeys. For over 10 years, you have forgotten your duties to the cause and to me. None of you looked, none of you believed I could return, even though you knew that I was the mightiest wizard to ever live, mightier even than death itself. Forgive us, mutters came as they kneeled and bowed. Crucio, Voldemort shouted, pointing his wand toward one of the wizards. Mere apologies will not buy my forgiveness. No, you owe a debt that you will all repay. Lucius has already started his repayment, and even he has a long way to go. How may we serve you? What may we do for the cause? Do not worry, my servants. I have many plans, some of which will be starting very soon, but first, a matter of discipline. One among us has not merely ignored me but worked against me. One among us is no longer loyal, and yet he dared to come here tonight, Severus Snape. The Death Eaters backed away from a figure that Harry realized was indeed his potions professor, pointing their wands at him threateningly. I did not know it was you, my lord. The familiar, formerly haughty voice was now desperately pleading. Had I known, I would have aided you. You prevented me from killing the Potter brat. You opposed me at every turn in retrieving the stone. Lord Voldemort does not forgive such trespasses. Let us all now see what happens to those who defy me. What followed was even more horrific than Voldemort's rebirth. Tortures of which Harry could barely conceive were sent at Snape, one after the other. Harry wished he could fast forward through them. Now beg for death, and I, being a merciful lord, will grant it. I will never beg to you, Snape said defiantly. Crucio, Voldemort snarled. You killed Lily Evans. If you will not beg for a quick death, you will have a slow one. I believe this one is yours, Sectum Sempra. Hundreds of cuts appeared on Snape's body. As the professor bled to death, Lord Voldemort addressed his assembled servants once more. Now that our traitor and spy is disposed of, let us move to more pleasant matters. For 10 years you thought me dead, killed by a mere babe, by the so-called boy who lived. And it just so happens that tomorrow is his birthday. We shall send him a present. We tried to strike at him, my lord, in your name, a brave Death Eater protested. But there were wards. Ah yes, those wards. The old fool Dumbledore set them up, and Lucius's investigations show that even I cannot easily bypass them, at least not quickly enough to stop the boy from escaping. But his friends are not so well protected. The Death Eaters watched in anticipation. Please tell us more, my lord, one begged, his voice filled with joyful cruelty. As part of my resurrection, I spent a year under the old fool's nose, possessing one of his professors, and in doing so, I learned of the so-called boy who lived. He is nothing but a pitiful half-blood, and his best friends are a mudblood, the near-squib Longbottom, and the youngest child of the Weasley blood traitors. While any of the three would suffice, as a gift to Lucius for his help this past month, I will celebrate the birthday of the boy who lived by killing the blood traitor Weasleys, and Harry Potter's present shall be his best friend's head. The Death Eaters cheered. When do we strike, my lord? We leave in 3 hours. Harry's eyes shot open. A glance at his window showed it was barely light out. Doubting the Dursleys would be awake yet, he crept out of bed and down to the house phone and dialed Hermione. It took 3 rings before someone picked up. Granger residence speaking, came the tired voice of Mrs. Granger. Hi, Mrs. Granger, this is Harry, he whispered. I need to talk to Hermione urgently. It's quite early, Harry. She's still asleep. Very urgently, he said as demandingly as possible while still whispering. Please wake her up and tell her that I had another vision. Vision, the woman muttered. I'll never get used to magic. Hold on one moment. Harry listened nervously for signs that the Dursleys might have woken up and was relieved when Hermione came on the phone a minute later. Harry, she asked with a yawn, what do you need? You had another dream vision. I haven't stopped. 2 nights ago, I saw you-know-who come back to life. God, she swore. And last night, I'm guessing you just woke up from something very bad. He's going to attack the Weasleys. What? She shouted. When? Today, you need to warn them. It will be big. Ron will be a particular target. Something about his head as a birthday present for me. They leave in under 3 hours. Hedwig's still at the Burrow, Hermione fretted. But Ron sent the Weasley family owl, Errol, to me last night so I could send you some birthday presents. I spent 10 birthdays without presents. I can handle one more. I know. I'll get them a warning. Good luck, he said urgently. Hermione dropped the phone as soon as the dial tone sounded and rushed to where she kept her stationery. Writing as quickly as she could, she put everything Harry had told her onto paper in a vaguely coherent order and tied it to Errol with the command to get the note to Ron as fast as possible. Please, she thought, let it be on time. Over an early breakfast, she was forced to explain to her parents exactly what was going on. Since no time travel information was involved in Harry's visions, she was able to talk about Harry's visions, the return of he who must not be named, and that one of her best friends was in literal mortal peril. Her parents were incredulous, but they believed her. While her father had to go open up their practice, her mother stayed as she awaited news from the Burrow. The first war against Voldemort was in the past, but not so far in the past that Mr. and Mrs. Weasley didn't have Bill put up the best wards that he could on the Burrow as soon as he got his qualification in the subject. That meant it took a group death, eaters a good 15 minutes to silently dismantle the protections on the Weasley home, while others set up protections against portkeys, apparition, and the flu. Too bad that the few who noticed an old male owl flying in thought nothing of it. Errol barreled straight into a half-asleep Ron through his open window, waking him up fully. With a brief complaint to the old ball of feathers, he untied the note. Recognizing Hermione's handwriting, he smiled, only to gasp in shock when he read the contents. Taking the time to grab his wand, he rushed downstairs to where he knew his mum was cooking breakfast. Mum, he shouted. What is it, Ron? His mother asked kindly. I got a note from Hermione, who got a telephone call from Harry. You weren't supposed to be in contact with him. Headmaster Dumbledore said so. And what's telephone anyway? It doesn't matter, Harry had a. Show some respect to the headmaster, Ronald Bilious. You know who is about to attack the Burrow, he shouted. Now don't be hysterical, she said as she walked swiftly into the living room, Ron following behind. We're all. The Weasley family clock, which showed the status of every family member, had all of the hands save the absent Bill and Charlie pointing at mortal peril. Mrs. Weasley rushed over to the fireplace and threw in some flue powder, but the flames did not turn green. They were cut off. Arthur, Arthur, she called, waking the whole house up. And then, in a wave of magic that any wizard or witch could feel, the Weasley wards shattered. As his parents and siblings rushed downstairs, Ron looked out a window to see the house surrounded on all sides by an assembly of masked wizards, led by a snake-faced thing that Ron could identify as you-know-who. Can we get help? Ron asked. Having died once, he didn't want to do so again. The flue is blocked, cried his mother. What about a Patronus message? His dad suggested. I've never been able to cast one. I'll try to manage one, his father said desperately. Expecto Patronum, he incanted, and a white mist appeared. Hedwig, Ron called out, thinking of another option. If he could get a letter even to the Lovegoods or Diggories nearby, they might yet be saved. But only an exceptional owl could escape the Death Eaters. He'd trust Hedwig over Errol, who had just finished carrying Hermione's warning or Percy's Hermes any day. But he didn't know where the snowy owl was, and when she didn't immediately appear, he wrote her off. "Come out, blood traitors," the voice of he, who must not be named, called. "Come and face your lord." "What do we do?" Percy asked nervously. "We have to delay somehow," Ron declared as behind him his father was trying and failing to cast the spell. Ron took a glance out the window, just in time to see a white streak dive bomb you-know-who. Executing a move that any Quidditch fan would call a perfect Ransky feint, the snowy owl raked her talons against Voldemort's face, taking out his right eye. Everybody, Weasley and Death Eater, was completely shocked, but Ron broke out of his stupor the fastest. Hermione had encouraged them to whisper spells because she'd read it was helpful for silent casting. And so, with accurate aim and a whispered Expelliarmus, a red beam of magic flew straight at the dumbfounded Dark Lord's hand, and he was pushed back, his wand flying into Ron's hand. "Who dares?" who shouted. Ron stood up. "Ronald, don't," his mum whispered, but he knew that if nobody stood up to the attackers, they'd all be killed. It was basic chess, after all. You can't win without going on the offensive. And like in the traps protecting the stone, he knew that sometimes a sacrifice was necessary. He walked out the door. "Hello, Voldemort," he declared. If he was going to die, he was going to die defiant. "Ron, don't," he heard from the twins, but he couldn't look back. "You certainly have a knack for being defeated by children. At least it wasn't a baby this time. Stall for time, keep his family safe. Your defiance is amusing, but ultimately pointless." Voldemort waved his hand and sent a wave of ropes at Ron, which he countered with a Mutter-Red Finitefrom, his inherited wand. Good, the Dark Lord was still playing around. "I'll die today, no matter what. Even if Dumbledore comes, I doubt you'd leave without my head, although I doubt Harry would like that as a present." Voldemort was dumbfounded for the second time that day. "How did you know that?" "Oh, right. He shouldn't have known that. He was too used to being loose-lipped, with all his secrets being protected by the time Fidelius thing. If Voldemort knew Harry could see into his mind, very, very bad." "I looked into the mirror of Erist," he said, trying to sound confident. Since Harry saw the mirror in a vision, maybe it wouldn't count as future information anymore. "And the mirror looked at me and judged me worthy and granted me its power. I see your desires, Voldemort." "Nonsense," Voldemort dismissed, trying to catch Ron's gaze, but he looked away. Hermione had found cursory information about occlumency and legilimency and told them of the danger, even if it shouldn't have been a problem. "Magic is mysterious. Old people are mysterious. Therefore, old magic is doubly mysterious." The twins, half hysterical, half horrified laughter helped him keep his calm facade, even when he was internally breaking down. "Expecto Patronum, yes," he heard his father's voice inside, and Voldemort windlessly summoned one of his Death Eater's wands, which began to glow green. "Time to get serious, then." "You don't want to kill me," he said quickly. He had one more delaying trick to play. "Why not? What does a 12-year-old have to offer?" "Nothing," he said honestly. "But I am the best friend of the boy who lived. I know his secrets, and know this, that if you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." Was it smart to quote Star Warsto, the Dark Lord? No, but it was the first thing that came to mind. Voldemort looked hesitant for a moment. Ron felt his spirits uplift, and in the corner of his eye he could see Albus Dumbledore appearing to his left in a burst of flame. His family was saved. But it was too late for him. Avada Kedavra. And in green light and pure agony, like his best friend had done once before, Ron Weasley died. And then the world shattered. Chapter 6, Preemptive Strike. "Has anyone seen a toad, Harry?" Hermione asked worriedly. "Did you die again? I thought you were safe at the Dursleys." No, Ron spoke up. It was me. Wait, asked Neville. What's happening? How did Ron die in the middle of the summer? Well, you know that I was having visions of you-know-who, Harry began. Voldemort, Ron corrected. Harry was confused. I thought we weren't supposed to say that name. I had to face down Voldemort, and I realized that we can't win if we can't even say his name. Voldemort it is, then, said Harry. Voldemort, Hermione repeated with only a slight hesitation. She only had 2 years of the fear to overcome. They all looked at Neville. It's all right if you're not, Hermione began. Voldemort, Neville whispered hesitantly. I'll say it. Now what happened in your visions? Well, he got the stone, as you know, and brewed the elixir. And please, please don't ask me how, but he managed to separate from Quirrell into his own body. The next night, I got a vision of him summoning his Death Eaters, killing Snape for working against him as a spy, and then they planned an attack on the burrow. I called Hermione as soon as I woke up to send a warning. I happened to have Errol to send Harry some birthday presents, so I was able to write Ron a warning, Hermione added. I got it, but it was too late. My mum, she wouldn't believe me. It was too late. It was too. Ron broke down in tears, the stress of facing down Voldemort finally being released. Harry tried to comfort his best friend, only pausing in his ministrations to lock the compartment door with every spell Hermione had taught him. Against the rules, but Malfoy didn't need to see this when he came through. It's all right, Ron, said Hermione gently. Take the time you need before you tell us. I was the hero, Ron said eventually. Hedwig took out his eyeball, and I took his wand in the surprise. And I stood up to him and lied to his face and Star Warsto him in the hopes that it would buy my family enough time for Dumbledore to get there and save them. What's Star Wars? Neville muttered absently. And after everything, after the worst minutes of my life, after I get killed giving Dumbledore time to arrive, we just end up back here. Everything was for nothing, and we're back at square one. Not for nothing, Ron, Harry said. He was truly impressed with what his best friend had done. You saved your family. Just because time reset doesn't make that any less important. Besides, you showed you were a hero, a bigger one than I've ever been. Harry knew that his best friend was sometimes jealous of Harry's fame, of his status as a hero. The envy had died down somewhat over the years, but it was still there. And being acknowledged as a hero by the boy who lived would help a lot, Harry hoped. Besides, we've learned a lot since the last time we were now, Hermione said. We know that Professor Snape is a spy. We know that the Philosopher's Stone simply isn't safe if we leave well enough alone. And we know that Harry can get dreams of Voldemort sometimes. We know that apparently Hedwig is an attack owl, Neville pointed out. She's the best owl ever, aren't you? And so smart. He petted Hedwig's feathers. I wonder, are you traveling through time with us? Hedwig nodded twice. That's amazing, Hermione exclaimed. I never thought I'd see one, said Neville. A real familiar bond. A what? Asked Harry. It's practically a legend, Hermione explained. A wizard and an animal so in tune that the animal shares the wizard's intelligence and power. I've heard Dumbledore has one, but they're supposed to take years to make, Neville added. Well, there's been a lot of time magic thrown around, Harry pointed out, and Hedwig's always been a special girl. That's all well and good, Ron said. We now have 4 students and a post-owl to fight Voldemort instead of just 4 students. And we don't have any strategies. Leaving things alone didn't work, exposing Quirrell didn't work, stealing the stone ourselves didn't work. What's left? Try to ward against one of the most powerful wizards in existence. I don't know, Ron, Harry said with more confidence than he felt, but we can't give up. I refuse to give up. I know I just did. I mean, I know I died the first time, but I was unconscious when it happened. This time. I suspect we'll be dying a few times more before this is over, Harry said. But I promise that we'll figure out how to stop Voldemort and break the loop. Now, what else did we learn last time? Well, we learned that every adult is bloody useless, Ron complained. Dumbledore lost the stone and then forced us to cut off contact for no good reason. Mum yelled at me instead of listening to the warning. Except apparently Professor Snape is a spy who, according to Voldemort at least, saved my life. We already knew that we literally couldn't tell the adults anything, Hermione said. But now I'm thinking that we shouldn't, even if we could. Hermione, I'm surprised to hear you say that. I know I'm a teacher's pet, she acknowledged, but even I can see that the staff is barely keeping us safe. And I learned that we can talk about future information if there's a non-future reason we would know it. I brought up the Mirror of Erist. Interesting, Hermione said, already considering what that would mean for them. This is all well and good, but we need ideas, Neville said. Ron's warding idea isn't a bad one, but it would take numerous years to learn enough. Which would require dying, Ron said. Lots of it, not fun. The door rattled. Malfoy time, Harry asked. Malfoy time, Ron said regretfully, and Harry undid the locking spells, preparing himself to refuse Malfoy once again. Harry's first week of school was basically like his third. With 3 solid friends in Gryffindor with him, he brushed off the stares and the whispers easily and pretended to pay attention to lectures he'd heard many times before. While Hermione was planning out their third-year curriculum at the Time Travel School of Magic, and Ron was spending some much-needed quality time with his brothers, who were rather confused with the affection but happy to provide. Harry and Neville tried to develop a strategy to direct the Hogwarts potions master's disdain elsewhere. They both knew the first-year brews well, but under Snape's ever-watchful and critical eye, they weren't so sure. While Harry remained one of Snape's targets, Neville was thankfully out of the line of fire. I know he's a spy, Harry said as they walked out, but he's a horrible teacher. Did you ever find out what would bring him to spy on Voldemort? Hermione asked. It's by no means an easy assignment. Something about a Lily Evans that Voldemort killed, Harry answered, remembering Snape's dying words. Harry, Hermione said with a gasp, that's your mother. Harry stopped dead in his tracks in the middle of the hallway. Snape was friends with my mother, he managed to squeak out eventually. I guess, mate, Ron answered. It's weird, though if he liked your mother, why on earth would he hate you so much? They didn't have an answer. Hermione insisted that they all learn the most challenging electives, and they all agreed once she pointed out that skills like warding, spell creation and analysis, and enchanting came from those courses and would be useful in figuring out how to break out of the loop and defeat Voldemort. Harry wasn't particularly enthusiastic about either course, but they weren't bad, especially with Hermione's careful teaching. In between lessons and very unoriginal homework from actual school, they worked on their most important project, a long parchment featuring a comprehensive record of all 3 previous loops. So long as they weren't planning on sending it to someone, the quartet discovered they could write down information about past loops and it would be protected. The timeline stretched from the reset point on September 1, which Hermione had dubbed Trevor's Zero, in honor of the toad she kept asking about to start each loop, all the way to Harry's warning and Ron's final confrontation with Voldemort on July 31. They included not only details of every major event, but every minor difference they could remember between the events of different loops. It took several weeks, but when they stretched it out and stuck it to a wall in the classroom they'd commandeered, they were immensely proud of their achievement. Now, we've already handled the flying class and the midnight duel like last time, Hermione said, pointing to their current position near the end of September. So we have a month to make a decision on how to handle Halloween and what to do from there. Ron walked across the timeline, examining everything they'd written. He stopped and focused on the month of February. Here, he said, pointing to the end of Christmas break. We know that Dumbledore said the Mirror of Erist would be moved to its new location soon, so the protections that we know about are all in place. Here, he pointed out April, and the crude drawing of a baby dragon. We know that Hagrid got Norbert's egg and spilled the secret to Fluffy. Which means, Neville said, his eyes widening in realization, that in that span of time the stone is safe from Quirrell and Voldemort, but we know how to get it. We steal it first, Harry said. It was a good plan, but there was one flaw. Can we really keep it safe, though? We can certainly keep it safer than the current protections, Hermione pointed out. So we'll try this. If all else fails, Ron can put it under his pillow. Under my, Ron broke out laughing. Sleeping with the philosopher's stone under my pillow. Maybe not your pillow, she acknowledged, but have you ever heard the muggle tale of the princess and the pea? Troll fighting should not have been so easy. Lying to the teachers also shouldn't have been so easy, but they had plenty of practice with both. They bought the death anniversary sob story and let them go with some points for the luck of defeating a troll as first years. At the Quidditch match, Hermione didn't need to set anyone on fire because Harry found and caught the snitch before Quirrell could manage to jinx the broom. I would have still set Snape on fire, Hermione informed them gleefully. He may be a spy and on our side, but we can't let Quirrell know we're on to him. Ron wanted to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas to spend time with his siblings. He still wasn't entirely over the attack on the burrow, and Neville's grandmother wouldn't let him out of coming home, but Harry happily accepted Hermione's invitation to spend time at her house once more. And if they noticed that Harry was way too familiar with them for having just met them, they didn't comment on it. He considered sending the cloak to Ron via Hedwig so that he could monitor the mirror, but decided against that since Dumbledore was able to see through it. Maybe. Harry wasn't exactly in his right mind during that encounter. After a happy reunion, Harry took the chance to check on the room that had once housed the mirror. He saw that it was no longer there, and most likely beneath the trapdoor now. All that was left was for them to pick a time. They chose to strike on the last Thursday in January. "Are you ready?" he asked Ron. The four of them were too many to fit under the cloak, so they decided only Harry and Ron would go. They snuck through the halls, avoiding Peeves, ghosts, professors, and prefects alike. With a well-practiced tune on his flute, Harry sent Fluffy to sleep. Gathering the cloak in his pocket, he let Ron jump down first, his wand already alight with flame, before following himself. They were quickly free of the devil's snare. Neville would love this, Ron commented, as they left the magical plant behind them to face the flying keys. An additional year of seeking practice meant that Harry was able to snag the correct key, even though its wings were undamaged. He even managed to leave those wings unscathed, lest they leave a hint. Jamming it into the lock and turning, they slipped into the chess room. Neville had reminded them that one of them could play the king. Harry took that role at Ron's insistence, while the chess expert took over the position of the king's rook. Although the game was close, Ron pulled out a victory again, leaving them to go forward. They were troll-fighting experts by now, but leaving a troll bashed in with its own club was kind of a giveaway. So instead, they cast some odor charms to distract the magical creature while running past its swinging club. Hermione had written down the solution to the potions puzzle for Harry and had spent winter break teaching him the basics of solving logic puzzles, just in case. As a result, Harry was able to quickly verify Hermione's memory of the potion puzzle and its solution. Not wanting to leave too much of a mark and unsure if the vials would refill, Harry drank a tiny sip of the forward potion, letting him pass through the flames alone, leaving Ron to follow if Harry hadn't returned in 2 minutes. For the first time since the time loop began, Harry looked into the mirror of Erist. He saw his father smiling at him and his mother giving him a hug. He saw Hermione and Neville and Ron alive and adults, having broken through the loop. He saw Voldemort, dead on the ground. "I need the stone to keep it safe," he forced himself to repeat. The reflection of his mother winked and slipped the stone into his reflection's pocket, and Harry felt the weight settle into his real pocket as well, breaking the reverie and letting him turn himself away from the mirror. Keeping his eyes forward, he passed back through the flames to see Ron about to take the potion and come after him. "I have it," he said. "That's good. I was worried for a moment. The mirror is addictive, its desire. You did a good job. Now let's get this back to safety." The only challenging pieces of their retreat were avoiding the troll once more, which was hardly difficult, and climbing back up through the trapdoor. Not wanting to move the brooms from the key chamber, they had attached a rope, acquired over winter break by Hermione, to the trapdoor, which Harry climbed up first, putting Fluffy to sleep with his music again, and then beckoning Ron to follow him. The rope detached, and the cloak once more donned, the pair left the forbidden corridor one magical stone heavier, and with nobody the wiser. At least, so they hoped. Nothing happened. Well, 5-minute Quidditch still happened, though not with Snape this time, as did Norbert, but those things they knew how to deal with. Neville got to join Harry in the delivery this time. He wanted to see the dragon off this time, and he hadn't gotten to go on any adventures at Hogwarts since the time loop started. Frankly, he deserved the opportunity, and he did very well. A true Gryffindor, through and through. As for the stone, there was nothing. No threats from Quirrell, no announcements from Dumbledore. It seemed that their plan had actually worked. Finals came and went. If taking the same exams twice was easy, then the third time they could have done it with their eyes closed. They were thankful that time travel for knowledge was not among the things caught by anti-cheating quills. And as the Gryffindors partied to celebrate the end of exams, the quartet prepared for their longest night. "We need to be careful," Ron pointed out as they set up his chessboard in the common room. "When Quirrell and Voldemort realize the stone isn't in the mirror, he might come after Harry as a consolation prize." "Would he be able to even tell?" asked Neville. "I mean, nobody noticed that Ron's been sleeping with the stone under his mattress since January." Harry thought back to his face-to-face encounter in the mirror chamber this night 3 loops ago. Maybe, back at the beginning of all this, he seemed to know that the mirror was the key to the stone, although that could have been an educated guess. "I guess we'll see tonight, won't we?" "We will, and the stone is still under my mattress, where it will remain until Quirrell is gone." Harry nodded. "Though I'm wondering now, why hasn't Dumbledore realized it's missing? Surely he had some sort of alarm." "It's a bit of advanced material," Hermione lectured, "but detection spells for adult wizards and underage wizards are wildly different. Adult magic is so different from ours. He probably only set up spells to detect adults and trusted Fluffy to keep the kids out." "That brings up another question," Neville said. "Why in the world were the protections so easy? I mean, 3 unprepared first years were able to get through them and get the stone." Harry thought back to his 2 trips through the trapdoor. "Not just that, they were almost built for us. The key room for me, the Star Seeker. The chess room for Ron, the logic puzzle for Hermione. The Devil's Snare for you, Neville, the herbology expert, if you had come along. The troll we had beaten before and was Quirrell's trap besides. I had seen the mirror over Christmas and been taught its secret by Dumbledore himself. And we got past Fluffy because Hagrid, our friend, told us how." "What, you're saying Dumbledore meant for you to go through the traps?" Ron asked. "Surely not," Hermione asserted. "There have to be reasonable explanations. For one, Fluffy was very secure. Even Voldemort couldn't get past it until he got Hagrid drunk and gave him a dragon egg." "What about the Devil's Snare, though?" asked Neville. "Both Hermione and I knew about it during our first year. It's second or third year material at most." "That's the brilliance," said Ron. "Would Voldemort, mighty Dark Lord he is, care to remember some plant that children learn how to deal with? Besides, it might have just been there for the soft landing." "The bent wings," Harry exclaimed. "Remember, the first time we went through, the wings on the key were bent. I had to be very, very careful not to damage the key's wings when we went through this time." "Nobody who isn't an extremely skilled seeker," could get past that room without bending the wings on the key and leaving a clear sign of their passage. And it's the first real obstacle past Fluffy, so Dumbledore could pop down and check every week, Hermione added. What about the chess set, though? The animated opponents were good, but Ron was just 11. Not to mention Voldemort and Quirrell beat it, while suffering from the effects of possession. They sat in silence for a few minutes as they tried to solve the puzzle. You said that it took you 20 minutes to beat the game, Neville said. Maybe it was just a way to stall for time, reduce the thief's head start. The troll was Quirrell's, Hermione reasoned, so of course he put in something he could beat easily. A Halloween encounter was just a coincidence. As for the logic puzzle, I was right when I said that most wizards don't have an ounce of it. I solved it in less than a minute, but it probably took Quirrell and Voldemort a whole lot longer. And would they risk drinking a poison in their weakened state? And that leaves the mirror, said Ron. A powerful and subtle enchantment that it took Voldemort weeks of non-stop study to figure out. Let's face it, without Harry's presence or Quirrell escaping with the mirror, he couldn't have gotten the stone. So any coincidences were coincidental, Harry said. And there's no conspiracy, and the traps were very good. If Dumbledore hadn't been sent on a wild goose chase to the Ministry, the stone would have been perfectly safe. Well then, Ron said after a moment's pause, up for some chess. How about some flute music, Harry said. Maybe I won't get interrupted this time. He didn't get interrupted, and after a half-hour concert, Harry joined his friends in playing rounds of chess to wait out the long night. Sure enough, a few hours later, Harry's scar lit on fire once more, but it was distinctly different from last time. He felt Voldemort's anger at first, but the pain quickly faded. He's gone, he announced, and faster this time. I think he fled Quirrell's body. We did it, Ron said quietly, as if not to jinx the outcome. We actually won. Just one problem, said Neville. What? Ron groaned. What problem? We have a philosopher's stone that we have no clue what to do with. I mean, Harry said, I do kind of know what to do with it. Remember, I had Alchemy 101 being poured into my dreams last summer. I could whip up a quick batch of elixir of life for you or transmute some base metals into gold. We don't exactly need to worry about old age, Hermione pointed out. And how would we explain where we got a bunch of gold? Ron looked for a moment like he was going to say something, but he just shook his head. Hermione's right. We give it back. I'll give it to Hedwig then, before we leave on the express, Harry said. If any owl can be trusted with the stone, it's the one who took out Voldemort's eye. Should we send a note with it? Hermione shook her head. Our handwriting is pretty distinctive, so is Hedwig for that matter. Color charms on her feathers, Neville suggested. The hours passed, and though they kept their wands ready to defend, no Quirrell appeared. And when 4 bleary-eyed first-years stumbled into breakfast the next morning, it was to hear Dumbledore announce that Professor Quirrell had succumbed to illness, also known as possession by a Dark Lord, and passed away. The quartet shared a small smile. They had done it, and the stone was safe. The leaving feast in red and gold was wonderful, and the train ride back to London enjoyable, but sad. Harry knew that the Dursleys would be waiting for him once more. But at least Hedwig would be joining him when she got back from the Flamels, and his friends would be writing him often. Or so he thought. Chapter 7. The Chamber Opens. Harry knew something was wrong when a week passed without a single piece of mail from his friends, even though he had sent them all letters. People who had gone through a time loop together wouldn't abandon each other easily, nor would any of his friends break their promises. To make things worse, Hedwig always returned from her trips to deliver mail looking distressed. Harry knew something was very wrong, and there was only person he'd trust to find the answer. It was hardly difficult to sneak a few pounds from the box where Dudley kept his excessive allowance, and his relatives were more than happy to see the back of him once he'd finished his chores. Walking the quarter-mile to the nearest pay phone, he dialed his best female friend, and hoped she'd pick up. "Hello, this is the Granger residence." Hermione's voice came over the line. "Hello, Hermione," he said. "Harry," the Muggle-born witch almost shouted at him. "We've all been worried sick. Why haven't you responded to any of our letters? Are you all right? Is Hedwig okay? Is—" "Hermione," he said, interrupting his friend's flow of questions. "I haven't received any letters, and you, Ron, and Neville clearly haven't gotten any of mine. But that means somebody's blocking your mail." "Why would anybody do that, though?" Harry asked. "And why would it be happening now when it didn't happen last time?" "I don't know," Hermione admitted. "But I'll write to Neville and Ron to see if they have any ideas. And, oh no. If someone is interfering with your mail, could they have stolen the stone from Hedwig? And for that matter, who or what is powerful enough to steal mail from the owl who fought Voldemort?" Hedwig confirmed that the stone was safely back with the flames, Harry said, and he heard Hermione breathe a sigh of relief. "As for your second question, I have no clue. But now that you mention it, that's terrifying. Properly terrifying, like Quirrell or Voldemort terrifying. Whatever it is, we'll face it and we'll beat it." "You're right, Hermione. And until then, I'll try to make a call every week or so if I can gather up the cash and get away from the Dursleys." "Good idea. Stay safe, Harry." "You too, Hermione." This promise, at least, Harry kept. Hedwig, forced away from her role as a post owl, instead decided to go around collecting spare change for Harry to call Hermione as often as possible. Harry twirled for the Dursleys, and his friends racked their brains to figure out how his mail could be blocked, and the days until July 31 came ever and ever closer. Thankfully, he had no Voldemort dreams, so he hoped Ron would survive the day. Harry himself would be celebrating by sitting in his bedroom and pretending not to exist while the Dursley family entertained one of Uncle Vernon's potential clients. At least that was the plan. The arrival of a strange creature named Darby the House Elf led to the Dursleys being embarrassed, seeing his warning for underage magic, and turning his bedroom into what was basically a jail cell, complete with locks on the door, a cat flap to be fed, and bars on the window. With the meager rations of food he was getting and no way to call Hermione, Harry could only hope that she would realize something was wrong soon and send for help. Starvation seemed like a horrible way to die, even if the loop reset afterward. On the first day of his imprisonment, Harry watched Uncle Vernon install bars on the window. He fantasized about having Hedwig attack the man. Unfortunately, they'd installed a lock on her cage. On the second day of his imprisonment, Harry got a single bowl of cold soup, which he shared with his owl. He spent the day making plans to hide food in his bedroom should he have to live through this again. On the third day of his imprisonment, Harry's relatives neglected to give him anything at all. He considered shouting as loud as he could to get the neighbors' attention. Maybe they would call the police. No, more likely his relatives would come shut him up before anything could happen. Besides, his throat was too dry to even talk. That night, Harry was too miserable to sleep, but he didn't have enough energy to do anything else. So he laid there half-lucid, hoping beyond hope that rescue would come. And come it did, in the form of Ron and his twin brothers in a flying car, breaking him out along with his trunk of magic supplies, despite his uncle trying to stop them. And that's how he got to the burrow for the first time. Harry's first exposure to Mrs. Weasley outside of Christmas gifts was when Ron told him that his mother had ignored Harry's warning in favor of chastising Ron for disobeying Dumbledore, and that had cost Ron his life. Now he was standing awkwardly while she chastised the twins, ignoring their protests that Harry was being starved to death. At least her cooking was marvelous and wonderfully filling after almost 48 hours without food or drink. During his month at the Burrow, Harry got to know the rest of the Weasley family better, the loving if overbearing mother, the kind father who was utterly clueless about Muggle things, despite it being his job, the mischievous twins, the aloof Percy and Ginny, who seemed incapable of stringing together a full sentence in his presence. She's always been fascinated with the boy who lived, said Ron. Most wizard kids in our generation were. Even you. Even me. But from the moment I got to know you, it was obvious that you were nothing like the storybook hero. Storybook hero, Ron. Yep, he said with a teasing smile. There were dozens of kids' books about you being raised in a castle, riding dragons, fighting evil, things like that. Harry Potter and the malicious manticore was Ginny's favorite, Ron continued. She'll probably ask you to sign her copy if she ever gets the courage to approach you. The only dark spot on his stay was the disastrous trip to Diagon Alley. Between the flu accident landing him in Knockturn Alley, the fistfight between Mr. Weasley and Lucius Malfoy, and meeting the obnoxious new defense professor, Harry considered the trip a failure, which hopefully wouldn't be indicative of the upcoming year. And then September 1 came. The Weasleys rushed to King's Cross, and for the first time, Harry was on his way to begin his second year. He strode easily toward the barrier of platform 9¾ not at all worried. He'd gone through it numerous times. He broke into a smile as his trolley hit the false wall, and the barrier was sealed. Ron ran to pick up Hedwig's cage, thankfully empty, as Hedwig was making her own way to Hogwarts, while Harry made up a thin excuse for the station guards. Both of them checked and confirmed that their wands, including Ron's new, properly bonded one, which he'd gotten along with Neville, on Hermione's advice, during a surreptitious summer trip to Diagon, were intact. "How are we supposed to get to school now?" Harry whispered, as he saw the second hand on the clock tick ever closer to 11 a.m. "We could take the car," Ron suggested. "Fly it to Hogwarts, follow the express." "What if the Muggles see us?" Harry argued. "Besides, can either of us drive?" A younger Ron might have ignored those concerns, but this one had years of experience teaching him the value of patience and planning. "You're right. We can wait for help. Surely somebody will notice that the barrier is sealed." Sure enough, within a few minutes, Ministry wizards were swarming the area. While some cast spells to force the Muggles away, and others examined the barrier, one official in red robes approached them. "Hello, boys," he said. "My name is Aura John Dawlish." Harry let Ron take the lead. "Hello, Aura Dawlish. We got trapped on the Muggle side of King's Cross. Have we missed the train?" "Unfortunately," the Aura said. "It's gone now, but we can send you to Hogsmeade Station by Portkey. It's a bit unpleasant your first time, but it will get you there fast." Dawlish called over a witch and explained the situation, at which point the witch summoned a brochure from a nearby kiosk and waved her wand over it. "Make sure you hold on tight," she said. "It will activate in about 20 seconds. "One more thing," said Aura Dawlish. "Could I have your names, just for our records?" "Ron Weasley. Arthur's son. And you, young man?" Harry was happy not to have been recognized for once, so he gave a small smile as he answered, "Harry Potter, sir." And he let the portkey pull him away, yanking on his navel as he spun through space. And the last thing he saw was two expressions of shock on their faces. The pair's special trip to Hogwarts was largely ignored by most of the school. Hermione and Neville, of course, were very worried. Draco used it to mock them, and Snape made a few comments about the pair being too special to take the train like the rest of us. The year began, and Harry was excited to have genuinely new experiences for the first time in years. Unfortunately, one of those experiences was Lockhart setting a cage of pixies loose on their defense class. Hermione, who was quite impressed by Lockhart from his books, tried in vain to defend her crush. After a few more lessons, she admitted that he was not a very good teacher, while the boys acknowledged that anyone was a better choice than Voldemort. Draco getting onto the Slytherin Quidditch team was an unpleasant surprise, as was his use of a horrible slur against Hermione. Ron barely managed to restrain himself from cursing the Slytherin boy. "If I hadn't spent the last 2 years ignoring everything that came out of his stupid mouth," Ron ranted as they made their way to class, "I would have forced that Burke to vomit up slugs from now till Halloween." The class material was pretty easy, all things considered, but having to do homework they hadn't done before was annoying. Still, Hermione forced them to digest the fourth-year curriculum in their spare time. This didn't leave the group much free time, but by the middle of October, they'd fallen into a smooth rhythm. Almost getting detention for tracking mud into the castle was annoying, and he hoped he wouldn't regret signing his friends up for Sir Nicholas's Death Day party. "I'd rather be fighting a troll again," Neville complained, as he mingled with the long-departed, trying to block out the smell of rotten food. "Why couldn't we just go to the feast?" Ron groaned. "Some of these ghosts know the most fascinating things," Hermione opined, "but some of them are so very rude, like this one girl named Myrtle. I was trying to be polite, but she stormed off crying." "Myrtle?" Harry asked. "I don't know her." "You wouldn't. She haunts a girl's bathroom." "And that's an image I desperately want to get out of my head," said Ron. "Let's just leave. Maybe we can some real food from the feast." They were on their way up to the great hall when Harry heard a cold, murderous voice in the distance. "Reptir, kill." "Can you hear that voice?" Harry asked urgently. "What voice?" Ron asked. "So hungry for so long." There it was again. It's moving away, moving upward. "We can't hear anything," said Neville, "and hearing voices isn't exactly a good thing, even in the wizarding world." But Harry was only half listening. "This way," he shouted as he began to run up the stairs. "It's going to kill someone." He hurtled up to the second floor, his friends panting behind him until he turned a corner into the last, deserted passage. "Look," Hermione said with a gasp, pointing down the hallway. Approaching, they saw a message painted on the wall in massive, blood-red letters. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air beware." "What's that hanging underneath?" Ron asked. A closer look revealed it was the still form of Mrs. Norris, Filch's cat. "We really shouldn't be here," Neville said. "We need to get away." But before they could, hundreds of students poured into the corridor from either end, trapping them at the scene of the crime. "Enemies of the air beware," Draco Malfoy called out. "You'll be next, mudbloods." The interrogation by Dumbledore wasn't exactly pleasant, nor were the rumors swirling around the school about their role in events. Filch couldn't remove the message, so he spent his time stalking around the school, taking points for the smallest infractions. Hermione researched the legend of the chamber, eventually asking Professor Binns for information, giving them the most interesting 5 minutes of history class they would ever likely experience. They all thought the heir was hiding inside Slytherin House, and Hermione developed an audacious plan using a restricted potion called Polyjuice to find out more. "Malfoy has to be involved," Ron argued. "He's the one who was spouting the heir's message on Halloween." "Not to mention," said Neville, "I've been thinking about Darby, the elf who stopped Harry's mail." "My mail, Darby? What does that have to do with anything?" "He warned you about terrible things happening at Hogwarts, but he did nothing last time." "And what is the one change between this loop and the last?" Neville asked. "We took the stone was out of the mirror," Harry answered. "So Quirrell never went to the Malfoys with it," Hermione exclaimed. "One of the Malfoys was going to open the chamber last time, but then Voldemort came and derailed those plans, so Darby had no reason to stop your mail." "That," Ron began, "makes perfect sense." "So the plan is the same?" Harry asked. "We brew the polyjuice and use it to interrogate Draco Malfoy about what he knows." "Exactly." Of course, no plan survives contact with the insanity that was Harry's life. The appearance of a rogue bludger breaking Harry's arm before Lockhart vanished his bones was bad enough. Colin Creevy's petrification was even worse, especially since many people seemed determined to blame him for it. And the reveal of his ability to speak to snakes, which, apparently, was a sign of being a dark wizard, just made things worse. By the time he literally stumbled upon the petrified Justin Finch-Fletchley and Sir Nicholas, he was thoroughly convinced that someone had it out for him. His friends, at least, stayed supportive of him. Ron, Neville, and Hermione stuck to him like glue, acting almost as bodyguards, while the Weasley twins tried to turn it into a giant joke. Still, by the time he reached the end of the term, he was glad to see the school empty out for the holiday. Neville had to go home, but Ron, Hermione, and surprisingly, Draco were all staying, so they decided it was the best chance to enact their plan. Of course, Hermione accidentally used cat hair in her polyjuice, while Ron and Harry had to act as Crabbe and Goyle, making it hard to ask anything remotely intelligent without blowing their cover. All they found out was confirmation that Malfoy Sr. was behind it and the location of his secret stash of dark artifacts. By the time Hermione's tail was removed, it was the middle of February. The only interesting things that had happened were finding a weird blank Muggle diary in Myrtle's toilet and the horrible Valentine's Day provided by one Gilderoy Lockhart. When Harry decided to write in the diary, he discovered it contained the memories of a boy named Tom Riddle, who claimed that he had discovered Hagrid was the true culprit behind the opening of the chamber. The only problem, Harry had known Hagrid for years. He was kind and would never intentionally attack people. Ron and Neville both told him not to trust something that can think for itself if he couldn't see where it keeps its brain. So he sat on the clue, hoping that he would figure out the truth before another attack happened. And then the diary was stolen. The next day was a Quidditch day, and Harry let it distract him from the mystery of the diary and his worries about the chamber, at least until he heard the voice. "Kill this time, let me rip, Tear." The voice, I just heard it again, didn't you? Ron shook his head, but Hermione clapped her hand to her forehead. I think I just understood something. I've got to go to the library. I'll come with you, said Neville, and the pair sprinted away up the stairs. What does she understand? Harry wondered as he tried to figure out where the voice was coming from. More than all of us combined, Ron answered, but she went to the library, and when she's done, she'll tell us. Now you'd better get moving, it's nearly time for the match. But just as he stepped outside with his Nimbus 2000 in hand, the world shattered. Chapter 8, The Rooster's Crow. Has anyone seen a basilisk? It's a basilisk, Hermione shouted in panic. Are you okay? Ron asked worriedly. Who died? Neville raised his hand sheepishly. Hermione told me to look in the mirror, but I forgot. I saw its eyes. It was painless. Wait a minute, Harry interrupted. What's a basilisk? It's a magical snake, the deadliest creature in existence, said Ron. Other than a nundu, Hermione corrected absently. But nundus are in Africa, Ron shot back before gesturing at Neville. If you see their eyes like Neville, you die. But if you see them indirectly, like in a reflection, or through a camera, or through a ghost, you just get petrified, Hermione explained. And since it's a snake, Harry realized, only I could hear its voice, because Parseltongue. Exactly. I think it was traveling through the pipes. That is great, Ron grumbled. Absolutely wonderful. Now we have Voldemort teaching us again, while a giant murder snack is asleep in a chamber beneath the school, one that we can't access. We'll figure it out, Ron. We won't let the mystery of the chamber go unsolved. The first few months of the school year passed them by once more. Hermione finished up teaching them the fourth-year books, while Ron constructed the giant timeline again, listing every clue they got about the chamber. But it was Neville who had the most important idea of all. We need to do more than just practice spells, he declared one day toward the end of September. What do you mean? Asked Hermione. We're learning the theory, we're casting the spells. What else could we do to learn them? It's obvious we're going to keep getting into trouble, Harry chuckled. Trouble was a mild description of his life since entering Hogwarts. Getting into fights we can't avoid with future knowledge. Let's face it, the only battle we ever win is against the troll, and you only figured out the strategy by sheer luck. We need to learn how to fight. Nev is right, Harry agreed. If saving the stone didn't get us out of the time loop, then we might have to end Voldemort for good. The question is, Ron pointed out, how do we learn to fight? As usual, when they needed to learn something, they turned to Hermione, but she appeared uncertain. "Don't look at me," she said. "I'm just your book girl, and combat isn't something you can learn from a library, I think." "So what?" Harry asked. "We just start throwing spells at each other." And that was exactly they did. Hermione found a few guides for duelists in the library which they all read, but mostly they fought. They refined their styles, stealing what worked from each other. From years of Dudley's torments, Harry knew how to not get hit, and he taught the group the value of dodging. Ron, ever the chess player, worked out chains of spells that worked together to drive an opponent into a metaphorical corner and defeat them. Hermione memorized hundreds of obscure combat spells, many of which were hard to block or counter, and she began to use transfiguration in her duels as well, a difficult skill favored by Dumbledore himself. Neville had trouble finding his niche, but when Harry reminded him of the ever-present threat of Quirrell hosting Voldemort, the shy boy was able to use his desperation and anger to tap into an immense well of magical power, causing his inherited wand to nearly combust. October came and passed, and soon it was Halloween again, time for them to face off against the troll once more. "You know," Harry commented as they prepared for the fight, "I'm glad we don't have to do this in the girls' bathroom." "That's one experience I'm glad not to have," Neville agreed. "Girls' bathroom," Ron muttered, but his friends paid him no mind. The troll had arrived. Despite Ron's distraction, the quartet knocked the beast out handily and dealt with the professor's questions. But instead of returning to their dorm for food, Ron dragged them up a floor to the hallway where Mrs. Norris had been found, which was right outside. "Moaning Myrtle's bathroom," Ron exclaimed. "We know the basilisk travels through pipes, so where would it be able to leave the pipes? And where did the very first chamber attack happen?" Harry's eyes widened in realization, and he saw Neville and Hermione had made the connection, too. "Next to Myrtle's bathroom," Harry said. "Not to mention, Malfoy told us that a Muggle-born student died last time," Hermione added. "And who is by far the youngest ghost in the castle?" "You're saying that Moaning Myrtle was the victim of the chamber the first time?" Harry asked. "It makes perfect sense," Neville said. "But we'll have to investigate later. We're expected back at Gryffindor Tower now, and we're all very hungry from skipping the Halloween feast." The next day, Harry joined Hermione to investigate Myrtle's bathroom. Hermione knew full well that she was abrasive even to her friends, so Harry's kindness would be far more likely to get what they needed from the temperamental ghost. In the end, Myrtle was more than happy to share how she died, big yellow eyes coming from a sink, one that oddly enough never worked, and that had a snake carved into the tap. "How do you think the chamber opens?" Harry asked after the ghost had vanished. "It would something only Slytherin and his heir could do," Hermione reasoned. "Parseltongue, tell it to open." "I'll try it, but it just sounds like English to me." "Open," he said. Hermione shook her head. Still English. Harry's eyes caught the image of the snake, and he imagined it almost start to slither. "Open," he hissed, and the sink sank into the floor, revealing a tunnel. "That's good, Harry," Hermione said. "Now can you close it? You really shouldn't be here, and we can go down with a rooster tonight using the cloak." "Hermione, I don't have the cloak yet." "Damn it," she muttered. "I hate time travel. This weekend, then, after the Quidditch match, everyone will probably be in their houses." Consulting with Ron and Neville, they agreed to a plan. Harry would make his appearance as Seeker, while Hermione kept an eye on Quirrell in case she needed to intervene. Meanwhile, Neville and Ron would capture one of Hagrid's roosters in a transfigured cage that Hermione enchanted with a silencing spell. Harry and Hermione would join them in Myrtle's bathroom, and they would end the basilisk once and for all. The first parts of the plan went off without a hitch. Harry won the Quidditch match, but not too soon, giving Hagrid time to come over and his friends time to steal a rooster. As the match after-party wound down, Harry and Hermione snuck out to the abandoned classroom they'd commandeered to see a very annoyed-looking cockerel sitting in the cage. "When do we go to take out the snake?" Harry asked Ron and Neville as the three boys put themselves to bed. "Tomorrow," Neville said firmly. "I want it gone sooner rather than later." "What if Quirrell goes down to check on the basilisk?" Ron wondered aloud. It had been a question that the time travelers had been considering ever since they'd decided to take out the basilisk now. After much consideration, Harry had made up his mind. "No," he declared. "I refuse to let myself be constrained by what-ifs. The worst that happens is Quirrell finds out, goes crazy on us, and we lose a few months." Neville immediately agreed, and Ron could see Harry's point as well. "I hate being forced to pretend that I'm the same 11-year-old that I was the first time we did first year," Ron said. "All my life I've wanted to have something, to be something special, something more than just the youngest son. And now I am, but no one can ever know. We're Gryffindors. Bold. Brave, we're going tomorrow." "Ron," Harry said quietly a few minutes later, after it seemed like Neville had fallen into his slumber. "When you treated me as a person, and not the boy who lived, that made you the most special person in Hogwarts." Ron Weasley fell asleep, with a smile on his face. Without the invisibility cloak, it was surprisingly hard to make their way from the 7th floor to Myrtle's bathroom, especially while carrying a chicken in a cage. "Remind me when we're done with this to look up invisibility spells," Hermione grumbled as they had to duck into an alcove for the 5th time to avoid other students. "Yeah," Harry agreed. "Dumbledore told me once that he didn't need a cloak to become invisible. It's no doubt an advanced spell, but when has that ever stopped you?" Peeking out of the alcove, Harry looked both ways. "The coast is clear. Let's get going. We're almost there." They didn't encounter any more students on their way to the bathroom, and with one last look around, the quartet entered their final destination. "Oh," Myrtle said as they walked in, "it's you four again. Are you going to fight the monster?" "Yes, we are, Myrtle," Hermione answered as Harry walked toward the broken tap. "Well then, you're always welcome to share my stall if you die." "We might take you up on the offer," Ron prevaricated, "if we end up dying." "Open," Harry hissed, and the wall opened up again. "Can you get us some stairs?" Neville wondered. It would be better than sliding all the way down that nasty pipe. "Stairs," Harry spoke again in the tongue of serpents, and the pipe reshaped itself into a stone staircase. "Let's go," he said, this time in English. Lighting up his wand, Harry led the way down to the Chamber of Secrets. Hermione was next, carrying the rooster, with Neville following and Ron bringing up the rear. "Do we know how we're going to get the rooster to crow?" Harry asked. His friends had said they'd work on that part of the plan. "A simple sunlight charm," Neville answered. "Lumos Salem, it's a bit advanced, but dead useful in herbology." After 5 monotonous minutes of descending stairs, the quartet reached a long tunnel filled with the bones of small animals. "How far down must we be?" Harry wondered. "We might be under the Black Lake," Hermione suggested. "Look how damp the ceiling and walls are." Suddenly, as Harry turned a corner, his foot got caught on something, but he managed to keep himself steady. "Whoa," he called out. "I found something. It's huge and scaly, but not moving." "I think it's snake skin," Ron said as he examined it. "But it's enormous, dozens of feet long." If the shed skin is this long, Neville wondered, how big must the real thing be? "Let's move on," Hermione ordered, and the 4 students skirted around the shed skin, continuing on their way to the Chamber of Secrets. A minute or two later, they found themselves staring at a dead end, a round door intricately carved with snakes. "Open," Harry hissed again, and the decorative snakes slithered as the door opened itself, letting them into the chamber at last. It was a large and empty room, whose only notable feature was the massive bust of Salazar Slytherin at the far end. "Slytherin sure wasn't very good looking," Ron joked, but it didn't do much to break the tension. "Blindfolds," Harry commanded, and each of them tied the strips of fabric that they had transfigured earlier around their eyes. Now, I need to figure out how to wake the basilisk up. Focusing on the image of a snake in his mind's eye, Harry started hissing in parcel tongue. Open, he attempted, but that did nothing. Wake up, basilisk. Come out, monster of Slytherin. On the last word, Harry heard the sound of stone grinding and a deep, ancient voice speaking. Who calls me? It demanded, but Harry didn't answer. Instead, he shouted out in English, Do it now. Lumos Salem, Neville incanted, and the light he produced was so bright that it filtered a bit through Harry's blindfold. The rooster they'd brought crowed loudly, but the snake kept coming. Again, Ron said desperately. Another spell from Neville had the rooster crowing again, but still nothing happened. Fools, Harry heard the snake hiss. You think that the great Salazar Slytherin would not protect me against the cockerel? Enemies of the air, you will pay with your lives. It's protected. Attack it, Harry shouted before yelling out the most powerful spells he knew in the general direction of the quickly approaching basilisk. Reducto, Stupefy Maxima, Reducto, Reducto, he incanted as he backed himself away from the large snake, but it kept coming. Impedimenta, Pratigo, Ron roared, but the snake kept coming. Bombarda, Neville shouted, and rocks began to fall from the ceiling, but this only agitated the massive serpent. Ecrodonte, Hermione began to incant, but it was cut off by a pained scream. It was the most horrible sound Harry had ever heard from the girl, and he knew that they had lost. Harry's last, though, was that he hoped Hermione's death wasn't painful, and the world shattered. Chapter 9, Crisis of Faith. Has anybody, Hermione began only to interrupt herself. Oh, thank God, I thought the pain would never end. Neville ushered the shaking girl into the compartment as Ron closed and locked the door. What happened, Hermione? Harry asked. Did the snake get you? Hermione could only nod slightly. Bit me, she breathed out. Fang in my back. Harry winced at the image and saw both Ron and Neville wince along with him. Of all the ways they died, by Quirrell's time delay curse, by killing curse, by basilisk eye, none were quite so brutal as being eaten by a massive serpent. Ron spoke up softly. When you're ready to talk about it, Hermione, we're all here for you. We can't rush into the chamber problem again, Neville added. We have a year to think and plan. There's no rush at all. When you're ready, we can start discussing our next steps. None of you had to wait before discussing your deaths, Hermione protested. None of us were eaten by a snake, said Neville. Nev is right, Harry agreed. We can take our time, run through our first year as usual, learn some new magic, and worry about the chamber later. At the mention of learning, Hermione perked up. You're right. We're up to the 5th year curriculum. It would be our owl year, you know, if we weren't in the time loop. Tell us what we'll be studying this month, Ron asked, and Hermione began to regale them with descriptions of advanced animal-to-animal transfigurations and counter-curse theory. Hermione was an incredibly strong person, and it was no shame on her that she needed time to process her death in battle against the basilisk. Harry would need time to process his part in that bloodbath, the failure of the rooster, the hopeless and panicked casting, the screams. He refocused on Hermione's voice and awaited Draco Malfoy, who would open their compartment door and begin the cycle of time anew. 3 weeks later, Harry was doing his first-year homework by rote in the quartet's commandeered classroom and reflecting on his life. Despite everything, it wasn't bad. The quartet had decided to go into a different house just to change things up, and their studiousness over the past loops convinced the Hat to send them all to Ravenclaw. The downside to this was that Harry couldn't get onto the Quidditch team until next year, but quite honestly, he was fine with a loop away from Oliver Wood's hectic training. As he began their Hogwarts education again, he got to have fun with his closest friends and make the public wonder how 4 people who had never met before this month had become so close. He loved getting personal tutoring from Hermione on the Owl Year material, And despite remembering his 2 deaths at Quirrell's wand, knowing that they had a plan to successfully deal with the possessed man allowed Harry to push the situation out of his mind. I want to duel. Harry was pulled out of his writing and contemplation by Hermione's voice. In response, he pulled out his wand and started moving desks out of the way. Any particular reason? Harry asked. Not that I don't always enjoy using my magic or spending time with my friends. One day, Hermione said forcefully, one loop, the 4 of us will end the life of that stupid basilisk, and we'll make it look easy. That was the scariest situation I'd ever been in, Harry said, after he was taken down in a body bind by Hermione. The witch undid the spell and helped Harry up. That's certainly the case for Neville as well, and probably Ron, too, though facing Voldemort might beat it. I'll be having nightmares about it for years. We all needed some time to deal with it. But it's time to move forward. Get better, faster, stronger, more skilled. Absolutely, another duel. By the time Ron and Neville came by an hour later, the score was 4-2 in Hermione's favor. Her death experience had unlocked a new level of viciousness and power from the witch. Combined with her broad knowledge of spells, Harry was having a hard time keeping up. Let's talk about the chamber, Hermione declared as she sat down. We need to figure out a new plan to deal with it, said Ron. The rooster didn't work. Slytherin protected the snake from that weakness, Harry revealed, recalling what he'd heard from the basilisk itself. I feel like we're missing something, Neville said. Like we only have half the puzzle. You're right, Ron agreed. We figured out Slytherin's monster, but we still have no clues about the heir. What about Tom Riddle's diary? Harry asked. It claimed that Hagrid was responsible, but I didn't fully believe that. He may think dangerous creatures are cute, said Hermione, but he wouldn't set a basilisk on the school. It's against every bit of his nature. That diary, we'll need to see if we can find it again this time around, Neville said, as he wrote the words Riddle's diary on a piece of parchment. The other clue, now that I think about it, was the Malfoys, Ron added. The interrogation went nowhere, but the connection between the Malfoys, Darby, and the chamber was well reasoned. Neville put Malfoys and Darby on the list as well. We can keep an eye on Myrtle's bathroom next year, Hermione suggested, now that we know where the chamber is. And I should try to avoid being framed as the #1 suspect, Harry added. Both of those items were added to the list. We have a basic plan, Ron said, and a year to refine it, so let's take a break and practice our levitation charms. After all, we have a troll to defeat soon. The rest of the term came and went, with one dead troll to show for it, yet Hermione still seemed somewhat off, though Harry, Ron, and Neville couldn't quite pinpoint how. At Christmas, Harry once again was invited to the Granger's house, where he noticed something rather odd. In their entire time they'd been at Hermione's home, she had not read a single book. After a week of this, Harry decided to bring it up with the girl in question. It's just rather unusual for you, Hermione, he said. I know that you're more than just a bookworm, but you haven't read a single thing since we got here. It was clear from Hermione's expression that he'd touched on something deeper than just some strange behavior over a holiday. You don't have to tell me, if you don't want to, Hermione. No, she said softly. I suppose I ought to talk about it with someone. The pair sat, alone in a quiet house, waiting for Hermione to gather her thoughts. When the rooster's crow failed, when the basilisk killed me, the pain was horrible, but it ended soon enough. But the rooster's crow should have worked. It should have worked, the book promised, and not just one book, every book. Scamander's Fantastic Beasts, Pythia's Guide to Magical Snakes, every single book we looked at said that a rooster's crow would kill it, and it did nothing. Harry could see where this was going without Hermione having to spell it out. Books had been her first friend, and even after she found friends at Hogwarts, they remained her bedrock when all else failed. Merlin, he wasn't prepared to deal with a crisis of faith in his friend, but he'd have to try. Even back at Hogwarts, I haven't been to the library except to build our OWL curriculum. I just can't. I trusted the books. I trusted the library, and did nothing but get me killed and put all of you in danger. Hermione, Harry reassured her, you didn't let us down. Any one of us would have come to the same conclusion. Besides, somebody was killing all the roosters for a reason. A rooster's crow probably does kill a basilisk normally. Harry had absolutely no clue if that was actually the case, but that wasn't what Hermione needed to hear. But Slytherin was a genius, and he might have found a way around it. And whoever the heir was didn't know that, so they killed all the roosters anyway. Hermione nodded along to Harry's words, but he wasn't quite done. None of us blame you. You're brilliant and brave and loyal, and yes, so very much a bookworm, and all of that is what Ron and Neville and I love about our best friend. Thank you, Harry, she said, pulling Harry into a massive hug. You don't need to give up your books, your love of reading, Hermione. Just remember what you told me in our very first year, that there are more important things. Like friendship, bravery, Hermione whispered, recalling her own words from so long ago in a future past. And love, Harry finished. If I were to ever have had a sister, I would have love for that sister to be like you. Tears started flowing from Hermione's eyes. Did I say something bad, Hermione? Harry asked. No, she answered. It just means a lot to me that you'd call me family. The rest of the year went as smoothly as before. Harry and Ron once again stole the Philosopher's Stone from the third-floor corridor and hid it under the latter's mattress, while Hermione and Neville were the ones to handle getting little Norbert out of the school. Meanwhile, the quartet focused on preparing for their exams, not the first-year tests, which by now were beyond trivial for them to earn perfect scores on, but the complete set of practice owls that Hermione was having them take. Nobody questioned why Super Ravenclaw Hermione Granger was looking at OWL test prep books as a first year, so she was able to copy said tests out of one such book. When the mock tests were done and graded, Hermione was pleased to report that all four of them would be able to pass their owls with at least an acceptable in every subject. Not bad for a group of 11 and 12-year-olds. She was also pleased to announce that she had successfully learned how to cast extension and preserving charms well enough to create an enchanted food basket that held enough to feed Harry the whole summer, and then some. Sending Harry back to his relatives was something that all three of his friends despised, but knowing the alternative, they considered it a necessary evil. The least they could do was make Harry's summers as comfortable as possible. Harry, for his part, promised to phone Hermione at least every 3 days, including the day after his birthday. If he ever failed to call, she would owl the Weasleys to come rescue him, blood wards or no blood wards. And as the Hogwarts Express rolled into King's Cross Station, Harry hoped that his time at the Dursleys would be short and uneventful, and that he would be able to solve the mystery of the chamber when he returned to Hogwarts and to his friends in the fall. What can you tell me about the danger, Darby? Harry hated the information blocking effect sometimes. For instance, right now, when he wished he could tell Darby that he knew about the chamber was going to be opened and a basilisk let loose. But instead, he had to watch the pitiful magical servant beat his head loudly against the wall for daring to speak against his master. It reminded Harry all too well of the times he was thrown into his cupboard for doing something freakish, or for doing nothing at all. Stop punishing yourself, please, he begged, and the house elf complied. You don't have to confirm anything for me, he said, but please tell me if I'm wrong. Your master's name doesn't happen to start with Mal and end with Foy, does it? The elf stayed still and silent, looking at Harry fearfully. Don't worry about it, it was just a passing thought, he said, and though both of them knew Harry was lying, it was enough to let Darby relax. I know you think I'll be in danger at Hogwarts, Darby, but I promise you that I'll be in even more staying here with the Dursleys forever. And Harry would have made this assertion, even had he not been starved the last time he'd experienced this summer. I'd rather be happy with my friends at Hogwarts, even if it's dangerous, than miserable here. Can you understand that, Darby? Darby is not liking, but Darby is understanding, the elf responded sadly. I appreciate that you're trying to help. Very few people ever have. What he did not say, for he didn't want to give Darby false hope, is that he would look for a way to help Darby in return. The house elf deserved better than his current situation. Darby left without levitating any desserts, leaving Harry in a bar-free room but with a dilemma. Should he ask to be taken to the burrow anyway, or just stay here until September 1st? In the end, he decided on the latter, because even if he was safe at the burrow the last time, it was better not to risk it. He had freedom and food, and that was more than he'd had last time. He would see Ron in a few more weeks anyway. With Darby no longer interfering, he was able to send Hedwig to Hermione to request enough money for 3 train fares to get him to London and back for shopping, and then to King's Cross to catch the express. His relatives were pleased not to have to drive him anywhere and grudgingly allowed him a day off of his burdensome chores to go shopping, so long as he put the freakish things in the cupboard as soon as he got back to Privet Drive. Seeing as he had already read his new textbooks and had no desire to reread either his real books or the complete Lockhart collection, Harry was just fine with this. He arranged with Hermione and Neville to go shopping on the same day, avoiding Lockhart's book signing. Ron, unfortunately, would have to go shopping on the same day as his family, and he wasn't able to convince his mother to alter that day. Harry met Neville's grandmother for the first time, and he wasn't impressed with the imperious woman whose favorite pastime seemed to be making her grandson feel small and unworthy. After that trip, it was just a week more of Privet Drive, and then he was off to Hogwarts for his second year. Again,